Tyrion Lannister stood at the window of his cramped tower chamber, high above King's Landing, gripping the windowsill as if it might steady the chaos in his mind. The city sprawled beneath him in a muddle of dark alleys and glimmering rooftops. Lamps burned in windows across the city, and somewhere below a dog barked. Unruly and unpredictable, the capital of the Seven Kingdoms teemed with as much life at night as by day, shifting and stirring like a restless beast. From this vantage it appeared almost serene. Tyrion's mismatched eyes, one green and one nearly black, flicked over the starlit sprawl. You could almost believe, if you wished, that this city was at peace. He knew better. One of his hands curled into a fist, nails biting into his palm. The message he had received just moments ago lay on the small wooden table behind him, a few short, sharply worded lines that carried the threat of a thunderstorm on their edges. He had suspected Cersei was scheming. That was no surprise. If she wasn't plotting, she wouldn't be Cersei. But this time, the game was bigger. The crown was in jeopardy, the city itself was a tinderbox, and a single spark from Cersei's hungry ambition could set King's Landing ablaze. He exhaled, turned, and snatched the letter from the table. The ink was still wet enough to smudge if he dragged a fingertip across the words. The gist was horrifyingly simple. His sister had used every whisper network, every unscrupulous contact, to rally supporters among the noble families. She was moving swiftly, determined to seize control of every lever of power in King's Landing. She wanted the throne in her iron fist, and she would trample whoever stood in her path. Tyrion gritted his teeth. If she took the city, she'd crown King Joffrey as her personal puppet, and no one would have the power to oppose her from the inside. She would be queen in all but name. Worse, she had cunning enough to buy or bully the city's protectors to her side. No matter the cost in coin or blood, Cersei would muster the gold cloaks to do her bidding, except Tyrion had made sure that the gold cloaks would look to him first. A subtle shift, well-placed bribes, a gentle chain of promotions, and carefully curated loyalties. All that might hold the city together if he acted swiftly and without mercy. His breath came quicker. His mind buzzed through strategies. Summon the captains. Double the watch at the gates. Secure the Red Keep. These were easy to say, but never simple to enact. Especially under the monstrous threat of Cersei's retribution if she discovered him openly moving against her. She was, after all, his elder sister. She knew his quirks, his preferences, his vulnerabilities. Perhaps worse, she knew how to wound him with a single glance or a single withering word, how to remind him that he was always the imp in her eyes. He set the letter aside, allowing himself a bitter smile. She might know him intimately, but she had never quite grasped the depth of his intellect. And she underestimated how fiercely he could fight to survive. And not just to survive, to win. That was Tyrion's greatest hidden weapon. She looked at his size and saw only a half-man, a scapegoat for their father's heartbreaks. Tyrion looked at her vanity and saw a crack in the foundation. It was time he used that crack to bring the entire edifice of her plot crashing down. He yanked on a tunic of black velvet, tightened his belt around his paunch, and made for the door. "Pod," he barked, opening it just as his young squire raised a shaking fist to knock. Podrick Payne nearly fell forward in surprise. "Fetch Bronn, and have him bring some of his best men quietly. Also, find Ser Jacelyn Bywater if he's still awake. I suspect he might be, given the state of the city." Pod blinked several times but hurried off without a word. Tyrion followed, his legs moving as fast as they could down the winding corridor of the Tower of the Hand. He felt an urgent need to reach the hidden war room he had established, a small council chamber rarely used, with thick walls and fewer prying ears. If Cersei was prepared to orchestrate a coup, then every moment he spent idle was another moment she could entrench her advantage. Candles flickered in iron sconces as he made his way deeper into the Red Keep. Shadows moved like conspirators on the walls, and his footsteps rang a hasty tattoo on the stone floor. Every so often he heard the distant clang of armor or the low murmur of a watchman. The fortress felt poised on the edge of violence. In the black corners of his mind, he imagined swords being drawn, 1,000 boots hammering the cobblestones, and the city ignited by the sound of war horns. He prayed to whatever gods might bother listening that he could stop it before it came to that. When he reached the small council chamber, Bronn was already there, leaning against the far wall with a casual air, arms crossed over his leather jerkin. His thin-lipped grin was as mocking as ever. "You called, my lord?" He glanced around the chamber. Several chairs with high backs stood around a broad wooden table. The smell of old parchment and candle wax hung in the air, and a single candle flickered in the center of the table, giving the room a ghostly aura. "Yes, and you were swift. Good. We don't have much time." Tyrion went to a cabinet in the corner, rummaging for a wineskin. The taste of strong arbor red might steady him or at least coat his throat before he rattled off his plans. He poured a cup, took a bracing sip, and turned back to Bronn. We're about to have a crisis on our hands. My dear sister is making her move. That means she's buying men, forging alliances, blackmailing whomever she must. And it means I have to step in before she does something that reduces the city to ash. Bronn shrugged. She's got gold, influence, a vicious streak a mile long. Hardly news. Tyrion rolled his eyes. I'm well aware. But what matters right now is that I have control of the city watch and I intend to keep it. I want all the captains loyal to me and me alone. I've already placed certain men in certain positions, but loyalties shift like sand. So you will take a contingent of your best and, I stress, discreet cutthroats, swordsmen, whoever you trust not to stab you in the back for a heavier purse. Spread them among the gold cloaks at key points, the main gates, the royal armory, and around the Red Keep's perimeter. Stay out of sight, keep weapons sheathed, but be ready to seize control if the watchmen start to waver. Bronn scratched at the stubble on his cheek. And if they waver? Tyrion exhaled. Convince them otherwise. With coin or with steel, whichever proves more persuasive. But no blood spilled unless absolutely necessary. The moment we start drawing blood, we risk open war in the streets. He paused, his eyes flicking from Bronn to the door. Speaking of which, where's Ser Jacelyn Bywater? As if on cue, the door creaked open. Ser Jacelyn Bywater entered, helmet tucked under his arm. He bowed his head lightly to Tyrion, ignoring Bronn's insolent stare. The knight's face was severe, his jaw set, but Tyrion saw something like determination behind his eyes. My lord, you summoned me? Ser Jacelyn, I have word that we may see a shift in power very soon. Tyrion dropped into one of the chairs and motioned for the others to do the same. Bronn smirked but remained leaning against the wall. I trust your loyalty, but that alone won't be enough if Cersei's conspirators outmaneuver us. I need to know that if I give the order, the City Watch will act under your command as Hand of the King's men, not the Queen Regent's. Bywater's gaze didn't flinch. I pledge my life to the crown, my lord. Currently, you hold the office of Hand. My oath is to uphold the security of King's Landing, not to a single Lannister, but to the throne itself. Tyrion inclined his head, though he felt a thorn of annoyance. Bywater was a decent, principled man, which was precisely why Tyrion needed him. But that also meant he couldn't be manipulated quite as easily as many of the city's more opportunistic men. I appreciate that. Then know that the throne's greatest threat right now is Cersei Lannister's personal ambition. She seeks to subvert the rule of law. I have it on good authority that she plans a coup to control the king as her marionette, with or without the rightful offices of court. Can I count on you? Bywater hesitated. I hear many things, my lord. Whispers, half-truths. But if Cersei does plan a coup, I will not stand idly by. I pledged my sword to keep the peace. That's all I needed to hear, said Tyrion, relief washing through him. Then here is what we shall do. First, we quietly reinforce each gate with men loyal to me under your authority. Bronn here will assist. Second, we lock down the royal armory. Third, the Red Keep itself must be secured. We cannot let Cersei's agents seize vantage points within these walls. I suspect she will attempt to place her own men in key guard posts. We'll do the same, but we'll be faster. Bronn picked at a spot on his jerkin. Seems straightforward enough. If she's truly planning something tonight or in the next few days, that gives us what? Hours, perhaps, to shift men around. Less than hours if we're unlucky, Tyrion replied. So we start now. He downed another swallow of wine and stood. Ser Jacelyn, we will walk the corridors of the Red Keep together and start making changes in the guard. I want every corridor that leads to the royal apartments or the great hall manned by those who owe their station to me, not to Cersei. Yes, my lord. Bywater paused. And if we meet resistance? Tyrion's lips pulled into a grim line. Resistance might be subtle, but it will come. Gently remove it. We cannot afford to draw too much attention, but we cannot allow ourselves to be pushed aside. A fine line to walk. I'm counting on your discretion and your sword. Bywater bowed stiffly and made his exit, leaving Tyrion and Bronn alone. The silence in the chamber felt oppressive. Bronn flicked his eyes to Tyrion. A quiet coup to stop a coup. You do realize how ironic that is? Tyrion's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. Aye, but that's King's Landing. Ironies piled so high we could build a new tower of the Hand out of them. With that, Tyrion led the way out into the dim corridors. They moved in near darkness, the hush broken by faint voices from distant halls or the scuff of boots on stone. Bronn slipped off to gather his hired blades and Tyrion went on with Bywater, whispering instructions to each guard post they came upon. Every now and again, he'd catch sight of a familiar face, someone who recognized him as the Hand, and he'd gently instruct them to move to a different vantage or to remain at their current station with a new order on their lips. To permit only those who bore Tyrion's personal tokens. It was tedious work, and he felt the strain in his legs as he kept up with Bywater's longer strides. But adrenaline fueled him. There was no telling whether Cersei was weaving her net at that very moment or if she'd already placed her men in corners he'd overlooked. With each step, Tyrion feared a dagger might slip from the shadows. But the corridors remained still, as if the keep itself held its breath. They crossed an arched bridge connecting the Tower of the Hand to Maegor's Holdfast. Shadows lay thick between the torches. Tyrion paused in the center, gazing over the courtyard below. An uneasy hush clung to the night air, broken only by a lone raven calling from the rooftops. Beyond the walls, the city of King's Landing shimmered in the faint glow of distant lanterns. He could scarcely guess how many potential enemies were out there. Lords with tenuous allegiance, merchants who valued coin above all else, lesser knights eager to curry favor with Cersei. In truth, the city itself might side with the Queen Regent if her promises rang sweet enough. Tyrion only hoped his own network of watchers and whisperers would keep him one step ahead. Across the bridge and into the next tower, they encountered a small cluster of gold cloaks, 4 men in battered half-helms, leaning with bored expressions by a narrow window. They saluted when they saw Bywater, then jerked upright at the sight of Tyrion. "My lord Hand," said one with a chipped front tooth. "A late walk this evening?" Tyrion folded his hands behind his back and mustered as much presence as his short stature allowed. "Duty calls. I have new orders for you four. You are to proceed to the southwestern tower and remain on watch until dawn. Report to Ser Jacelyn Bywater for further instructions. Allow no one but those bearing my seal to pass. Is that understood?" The men cast uncertain glances at one another, then nodded. "Yes, my lord." Ser Jacelyn offered them a short nod in return. "Go, and be quick about it." When the gold cloaks had hurried away, Tyrion let out a small sigh. If only all men would be so easily redirected. Bywater pressed his lips in a thin line. "The night is not done, my lord." They continued on. The corridors were labyrinthine. Drifting from hall to hall, they roused half-asleep soldiers, replaced suspicious ones, and quietly dispensed orders that no one was to discuss with any soul who wasn't directly under Tyrion's command. Some men balked, a few protested, but Bywater's stern glare settled matters. Gold cloaks who argued too much found themselves shifted to out-of-the-way posts, like the city harbor or a gate on the far side of Flea Bottom, where they would be less inclined to cause trouble. Hours later, Tyrion felt exhaustion weigh down his limbs. Each step was an effort. Finally, he paused in a corridor near the royal apartments. A pair of guards stood at attention, newly placed, both men Tyrion vaguely recognized as sellswords who had been sworn into the watch thanks to his own gold. They eyed him with a mixture of fear and respect. He took that as a good sign. "This is as far as I need go tonight," he told Bywater, voice low. "You've done well. Continue to reinforce the key posts until dawn. If anything suspicious arises, any calls for alarm, send for me. I'll be in my chambers or in the council chamber." Bywater bowed. "I'll do my duty. And I pray the gods keep us from any bloodshed." Tyrion wanted to laugh at that. The gods rarely concerned themselves with King's Landing, as far as he could tell, but he mustered a curt nod. "As do I, Ser Jacelyn. Carry on." With that, Tyrion turned down a shorter hallway leading toward his private apartments. Despite the tension, his mind swirled with the day's events and the day yet to come. It was daunting. The city was a cauldron of secrets and resentments. But he was Tyrion Lannister, and he knew how to play the game. Cersei might be cunning, but he had no shortage of wit. With luck and with a fair dose of skill, he intended to outmaneuver her before sunrise. He was nearly at his door when he heard shuffling footsteps behind him. Out of instinct, he swiveled on his heel, hand dropping to the small dirk at his belt. But it was only Podrick Payne, face flushed, breath coming fast. "My lord," Pod panted. "I've found Bronn. He's placed his men. But there's a rumor spreading, something about the Queen Regent heading to the Great Hall with a retinue. People say she's summoning soldiers." Tyrion's blood turned cold. "Yeah? Damn her impatience. No matter. We must move more quickly than she does," Pod informed Ser Jacelyn. Before he could finish, a muffled clang of steel echoed down the corridor, faint but unmistakable. It came from the direction of the Great Hall. Tyrion cursed under his breath. His eyes darted around. "Fine. I'll go myself. Pod, stay behind me and keep your head down. If you see trouble, run for Bywater or fetch Bronn if you can't find him." Pod's eyes went wide, but he nodded. They set off at a brisk pace, Tyrion all but jogging with his shorter stride, Pod hurrying behind. As they neared the great hall, the echo of voices reached them, raised voices, a woman's tone that Tyrion knew too well. Cersei in full fury. His heart thundered in his chest. If she had already rallied a unit of gold cloaks to her side, all of his maneuvering could be undone in moments. He might walk in there to find half the watch arrayed against him. Then again, if his quiet reassignments had been effective, she might find herself unexpectedly outnumbered. They reached a threshold flanked by 2 gold cloaks. They blocked Tyrion's way, though their postures spoke of hesitation. One was tall with a scraggly mustache, the other thick around the middle. "My lord Hand," Scraggly Mustache said, offering the barest hint of courtesy. "The Queen Regent has commanded that no one enter." Tyrion tilted his chin up. "Has she now?" "Step aside." They exchanged glances. That moment of doubt was enough for Tyrion to press forward, ignoring them with as regal an air as a dwarf could muster. Pod followed close behind. To his relief, the guards did not dare lay a hand on him. They stood uncertainly, letting him pass. That was a small victory for Tyrion's plan. At least they feared crossing him as much as they feared disobeying Cersei. When Tyrion emerged into the great hall, the sight before him was tense and bright with torchlight. Dozens of torches burned in their sconces, casting a flickering glow across the polished floor. Rows of empty wooden benches stretched toward the raised dais. At the far end, beneath the cavernous ceilings, stood Cersei Lannister herself, hair like spun gold, wearing a gown of emerald green that shimmered with every movement. A circle of men in armor surrounded her. Gold cloaks, Tyrion noted, but not as many as he feared. 10, perhaps a dozen. In front of her, 2 men stood in partial armor bearing the sigils of lesser houses. Their swords were sheathed, but their hands gripped the hilts. Their faces were set in apprehension. They looked like knights caught in a predicament. Cersei's eyes snapped to Tyrion, narrowing. Her voice, cold and commanding, rang out across the hall. "You dare enter here, little brother?" Tyrion forced a smile, though his heart pounded. "We're both Lannisters, dear sister, and both in service to King Joffrey, are we not? The Great Hall is the seat of the throne. I see no reason why I should be barred from entering." She took a slow step forward, her gown swishing around her ankles. Her eyes, so much like his own in color, burned with malice. "I'm here on the king's orders to reorganize the city watch. We can't have incompetence in these troubled times, wouldn't you agree?" "Of course," Tyrion said. "And I've been doing the very same. Perhaps we can reorganize them together." She let out a derisive laugh, a sound that echoed up into the rafters. "You truly believe your pitiful attempts at securing the city out of my sight have gone unnoticed? You've crept around in the dark tonight, shifting guards from post to post. You think I'm so foolish that I wouldn't hear of it?" Tyrion felt the brunt of her fury like a wave of heat on his face. "Let us speak plainly, sister. We have one king, one throne. I serve Joffrey as Hand. You serve him as Mother and Queen Regent. There is no reason for us to clash. Unless you intend to be more than just his mother." Her lips curved in a cold smile. "I intend to ensure that our dear Joffrey remains safe from traitors. I smell treason around every corner, especially here in the Red Keep. Now, if you would kindly step aside, I have loyal men to install in positions you seem to have overwritten with your own pawns." Behind her, a few of the gold cloaks exchanged wary glances. Tyrion recognized none of them. Presumably these were new recruits, lured by her promises. But across the hall, he caught sight of movement. 2 more watchmen emerged from a side door. Men he knew had been placed by Ser Jacelyn. Their eyes fell on him, awaiting instruction. Another small point in his favor. Tyrion rubbed his temple as if fatigued. "I see. Loyal men, you say? To Joffrey or to you?" Cersei's smile turned brittle. "I am the king's own blood. My interests are the crown's interests. But you've always had your own agenda, scurrying around in the dark. Even our Lord Father found you untrustworthy." Tyrion's temper flared. He stepped forward, ignoring Pod's tug on his sleeve. "Father might have found me many things, but he never accused me of being a fool. What you're doing is foolish, Cersei. Seizing power in such a blatant manner will only breed chaos. The city won't stand for it. The lords will question your intentions. Even the king himself might." "Enough!" she roared, voice echoing off the pillars, her cheeks colored with anger. "Your pathetic attempts to shame me will not work. My men will have their orders, and you will step aside or what?" Tyrion retorted, letting his own anger heat his words. Will you arrest the hand of the king? Will you dare call me a traitor? You'll have to do it openly, here and now, in front of every soul in the Red Keep. Do you think you have enough blades for that? At that, Cersei hesitated. Her eyes flicked over the hall, taking note of the watchers in the shadows. More gold cloaks had trickled in from various doors. Some wore uncertain expressions, glancing from Tyrion to the Queen Regent and back again. Tension thickened the air like an impending storm. Tyrion swallowed, his throat dry. He forced calm into his voice. We can resolve this without bloodshed. You want power, fine. You have it. You're the Queen Regent. But there are lines we must not cross. The city is restless. The commoners resent the throne's extravagance and the rising price of bread. If we spark an internal conflict, they will riot. We cannot afford to let our personal feud burn the realm. Or do you wish to see King's Landing aflame? Something flickered in her gaze. Annoyance or maybe a shard of realization. But she lifted her chin defiantly. This city is safer in my hands than in yours. You lack the spine to do what must be done. She turned to the gold cloaks that surrounded her. All of you hear me. By the king's authority, I am placing new officers throughout the Red Keep and the city gates. You will follow my commands. In that moment, Tyrion saw his chance. He raised his voice to a clarion pitch. Gold cloaks, you are sworn to protect the king and the throne. I stand here as the hand of the king, appointed lawfully. Anyone who defies the hand defies the crown itself. Is that what you wish to do? Will you break your vows? A silence followed, heavy with possibility. The men shifted uncomfortably. Cersei's eyes flared. He is my brother, but he stands in open defiance of me, your Queen Regent. Obey him and you disobey the Queen. Need I remind you? I speak for King Joffrey. The tension became suffocating. A single voice could tip the balance. Tyrion's palms felt clammy. He saw in the men's eyes the flickering question. Obey the Queen Regent or obey the hand? Which oath took precedence? Tyrion had prepared for this exact moment through bribes, promotions, quiet promises. But would it be enough? Before any of the watchmen could speak, the echo of armored footsteps thundered in from the corridor. Ser Jacelyn Bywater strode into the hall, flanked by another 24 gold cloaks. All of them men carefully placed by Tyrion in recent months. They fanned out behind Bywater, halberds and spears at the ready. The men who stood with Cersei eyed the new arrivals warily. Bywater's voice was calm but firm. My queen, my lord hand, is there some disturbance here? Tyrion could almost taste the relief surging in his chest. Ser Jacelyn, you come at a fortuitous time. He gestured to Cersei. The Queen Regent here was giving instructions to the watch. Instructions that contradict my own. I asked these men whose orders they intended to obey. The line of watchmen behind Bywater formed a silent, resolute wall. Bywater met Cersei's gaze evenly. The men of the city watch stand behind the throne, my queen. But so long as Lord Tyrion holds the office of the hand, he speaks with the king's voice in matters of law and order. If we begin to ignore that chain of command, then we invite anarchy. Cersei's lips parted, her nostrils flaring. You dare speak to me of anarchy? I speak of duty, Bywater said quietly. Your Grace, I advise you to let the Lord Hand coordinate the city watch until the king decides otherwise. Tyrion felt a stirring of triumph. Thank the gods for honest men. For a moment, he thought Cersei might lash out in a rage, call for swords, and turn the hall into a charnel house. But she stared at Bywater, eyes blazing, and took a single trembling breath. She forced a tight smile, though her eyes never lost their fury. Very well. If that is how you interpret your vows, so be it. I have no desire to spill blood in Joffrey's own hall. She turned to Tyrion, voice laced with venom. But know this, brother, you will regret crossing me. With that, she spun on her heel and marched out of the hall, her cluster of 12 gold cloaks following behind. Some looked relieved to leave, others apprehensive. Either way, they disappeared into the corridor, the echo of their footsteps fading into the distance. Tyrion let out a long exhale. He realized he had been trembling. Ser Jacelyn, you arrived just in time. Bywater inclined his head. I did only what honor demanded, but she won't let this rest. She's certain to make another attempt, perhaps in a less public space. I know, Tyrion muttered. We need to remain vigilant. For now, though, we've shown her that the City Watch stands with us, at least the majority of it. Bronn slipped in through one of the side entrances, cutting a dark figure against the glow of torches. He strolled to Tyrion's side, a half-grin on his lips. Heard a bit of shouting in the hall. Seems I missed the fun. She's left. Tyrion nodded. She's gone for now. But I doubt she'll retire gracefully. We must treat this as a war, Bronn. She'll use every trick. We need the gold cloaks on guard. Bronn cast his gaze over the men still assembled. They look ready enough. A decent number, too. But the city's big. She might not strike here next time. She could try buying loyalty in the streets or turning the populace against you. Tyrion sighed. I know. We'll address that soon enough. For the moment, let's secure the keep properly and get some rest if we can. Tomorrow will be an even longer day. Bywater took command of the men, dispersing them to reinforce the key points. Podrick stuck by Tyrion's side, eyes wide, as they departed the Great Hall. The surge of adrenaline was already fading, leaving Tyrion drained. But he felt a grim satisfaction. Cersei's attempt at an open coup had been thwarted. That alone was worth savoring for a moment. Still, as he trudged back to his chambers, he couldn't shake the dread that clung to him like a cold sweat. Cersei would not stop. She would come at him again, and next time she might not bother with so public a move. He only hoped he'd be ready. Tyrion slept fitfully, his dreams filled with images of crossbow bolts flying through dim corridors and Cersei's mocking laughter echoing off the walls of the Red Keep. When he woke, the pale dawn light slanted through his narrow window, revealing the dust motes dancing in the stale air. He rubbed a hand over his face. The events of the previous night sat heavily on him, as if he'd drunk an entire cask of sour wine. He rose, dressed, and found Podrick standing outside his door, alert but exhausted, dark rings under the young man's eyes. Pod, Tyrion said, his voice still rough with sleep. I trust no one tried to stab me in my sleep? Pod shook his head. No, my lord. It was quiet. Yes, too quiet, Tyrion muttered. I dislike it when things are quiet here. Usually means the storm is gathering strength elsewhere. He sent Pod to fetch Ser Jacelyn, Bywater, and Bronn so that they might assemble in his private audience chamber, the same small room where he did most of his planning. The corridors they passed through were subdued, the usual bustle of castle servants oddly muted. Gossip traveled fast in King's Landing, and everyone was already whispering about the confrontation in the Great Hall. Now the Red Keep seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see which lion would bare its claws first. Tyrion reached the chamber and settled in a high-backed chair. The table before him was littered with scrolls and half-written parchments. A brazier stood nearby, coals glowing faintly, chasing away the chill of early morning. He realized with mild annoyance that he had not eaten yet, and his stomach let out a low rumble. But matters of state took precedence. Food could wait, at least for a while. Soon, Bywater arrived. The knight removed his helmet and gave a respectful bow. He looked as though he had been patrolling all night, the lines on his face more pronounced than usual. Bronn strode in behind him, leaning casually against the door frame for a moment before closing it. He wore a self-satisfied smirk, as if the tension in the air amused him more than worried him. Tyrion steepled his fingers and surveyed them. Well, gentlemen, we survived the night. I suppose that is reason to be grateful, but I doubt our troubles ended at sunrise. Cersei left the Great Hall with her men, and I expect she spent the hours since plotting a new strike. Ser Jacelyn, any news from your patrols? Bywater cleared his throat. I've kept the watch rotating through the key corridors in shifts of 4 hours. I've also posted extra men at the gates, as you ordered. So far, no direct challenge from the Queen Regent's loyalists. However, I've heard reports that she's been summoning various lords and knights to her private chambers. Some are bannermen of the Crownlands, others are minor courtiers who depend on royal favor. My men overheard them discussing alliances, increased stipends, possibly new trade privileges if they support her. Tyrion nodded grimly. That was exactly the angle he expected her to take. If she couldn't seize the City Watch by force, she would attempt to rebuild her power base through flattery, bribery, and intimidation. We can't arrest her for having private meetings. Still, I want to know exactly who's being summoned and what's promised to them. Are your spies up to the task? Bywater hesitated. Spying isn't something the Watch excels at, my lord, but I'll do my best. We can station watchers around her apartments without drawing too much attention. If she sends envoys into the city, we can track them." Bronn's mouth twisted in a wry grin. "My men know a thing or two about shadowing a mark. For the right coin, they'll listen at windows, follow footprints, whatever you like. Could be helpful if you don't mind using mercenaries for espionage." Tyrion regarded him thoughtfully. He knew Bronn's men were effective but not always subtle. Yet in this game, half measures would lead to disaster. "Very well. I'll give you a purse of gold to distribute as you see fit. Hire discreet watchers and place them around the Red Keep, especially near Cersei's usual haunts. We must stay one step ahead. If we catch wind that she's preparing another military move, we act first." Bronn inclined his head, a predatory gleam in his eye that suggested he relished the opportunity. "Consider it done." Tyrion turned back to Bywater. "Meanwhile, keep reinforcing the sense that the Watch answers to me. Morning inspections, new rotations, anything that reminds them who's giving the orders. If you find a captain who seems more loyal to Cersei than to the throne, shift him elsewhere, some dull outpost in Flea Bottom. Do it subtly, though. We don't want her to see how thoroughly we're cutting off her influence." "Yes, my lord," Bywater said. "And what of the king? Joffrey is still the nominal ruler. He might voice an opinion soon or be swayed by the Queen Regent's words." The question made Tyrion's jaw tighten. Joffrey was the wild card in all this, a cruel and capricious boy who alternated between tantrums and sadistic amusements. If Cersei convinced him that Tyrion was undermining his rule, Joffrey might command the Watch to arrest his uncle on the spot. Or else do something equally rash, like ordering Tyrion's head removed. The Child King's unpredictable nature was as dangerous as wildfire in a crowded storehouse. "I'll speak with him," Tyrion said at last. "He's volatile, but if I approach him carefully, flatter his intelligence, appeal to his vanity, I may steer him away from doing anything catastrophically foolish. Still, it's possible Cersei will try to speak to him first. I'll need to beat her to it." Bywater bowed again and took his leave, presumably to oversee the watch. Bronn trailed out a moment later, humming under his breath as if he anticipated collecting coin and forging new alliances. Tyrion was left alone with Pod, who shifted from foot to foot near the door. "You did well last night, Pod," Tyrion said after a moment, his tone surprisingly gentle. "You showed courage." Pod's cheeks reddened and he muttered a thanks, avoiding eye contact. There was something endearing about the boy's awkwardness. At least Tyrion knew Pod would not betray him. Loyalty was a rare and precious thing in King's Landing. They left the chamber and made their way down the corridors toward the throne room, where Joffrey often held morning audiences when he bothered to appear at all. The air carried a faint tang of incense and dust, mingling with the smell of damp stone. Servants hurried past, bowing their heads in a token of deference, but their eyes flicked nervously at Tyrion as if expecting him to sprout horns at any moment. When Tyrion reached the doors of the throne room, he found a pair of gold cloaks standing guard. They stepped aside without protest, letting him enter the vast hall with its ornate pillars and long stretch of polished floor. Dawn light streamed through the high windows, illuminating motes of dust that drifted like tiny spirits. At the far end, the Iron Throne loomed, a grotesque sculpture of fused, twisted swords. Joffrey was indeed present, sprawled atop the Iron Throne in a posture more careless than regal, his blonde hair shining in the sunlight. He wore a burgundy tunic trimmed with gold, a miniature crown perched on his brow, and his eyes sparkled with the malice of someone waiting to be amused by cruelty. The King's Guard stood at either side, their white cloaks gleaming. Off to one side, Queen Cersei watched her son with a triumphant expression until she noticed Tyrion. Tyrion's gut tightened at the sight of her. This meeting might well be the next arena for their confrontation. He composed his features into a polite mask and approached the base of the throne, bowing deeply. Pod remained several paces behind him. "Your Grace," Tyrion said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I come to offer my counsel as hand." Joffrey tilted his head, regarding Tyrion as though he were a curiosity in a menagerie. "So you do. My mother says you've been causing all manner of disturbance in the Red Keep, moving guards, giving strange orders in the dead of night. Is that what a hand does?" Tyrion forced a mild smile. "A prudent hand ensures the safety of the king. With rumors of unrest in the city and the possibility of enemies plotting against the crown, I felt it necessary to strengthen our defenses. Surely your Grace desires such diligence." Joffrey sniffed, clearly unimpressed. "I desire obedience. I am the king. And I serve you," Tyrion replied smoothly. "All I have done is in service of your reign. The city watch must be ready for any threat both from without and within." Cersei stepped forward, her green gown rustling. The slight shadows under her eyes told Tyrion she hadn't slept much either. Joffrey, dear, we have no real threats inside the city walls. Only those who stir up trouble for their own ends. We must be wary of conspirators, yes, but the best course is to trust the counsel of those who truly have your best interests at heart. Indeed, Tyrion said, arching an eyebrow. And who might that be, sister? You? Myself? We are both Lannisters after all. Cersei's face hardened into a cold smile. As you say, we are family. Yet some of us have earned the king's trust through years of devoted care. She gazed at Joffrey, who looked momentarily bored. Tyrion recognized her strategy. She was appealing to the boy's memory, reminding him of her maternal role. But Joffrey's moods were mercurial. Tyrion needed a different tactic. He cleared his throat. Your Grace, might I suggest we address any lingering confusion regarding the command of the City Watch? My sister seems to believe she should place her own men in positions already occupied by those loyal to you. Such duplication of force would waste precious resources. Joffrey frowned. Is this about that business in the Great Hall last night? Mother said you and your guards tried to bar her from reassigning certain captains. I did not bar her, Tyrion replied, keeping his voice calm. But I questioned the wisdom of sudden changes that might disrupt the watch's efficiency. We are at a delicate time, with the populace uneasy about the cost of bread. A riot could happen at any moment. We need order, not chaos. Joffrey's gaze flicked to Cersei. Mother. Cersei's lips pressed together. I sought only to remove incompetent men and replace them with soldiers of proven loyalty to the crown. It was your uncle who chose to make a spectacle. Tyrion bowed his head in mock humility. If I caused a spectacle, it was unintentional. My sole aim is to protect your Grace from any potential threat, no matter where it comes from. Joffrey tapped his fingers on the arm of the throne. The sound of metal on metal echoed, for the seat itself was a patchwork of steel blades. Uncle, you are the hand. Mother, you are my regent. I will not tolerate bickering between my two closest advisors. He paused, scanning their faces. For now, the City Watch remains under the hand's direction. But any major changes will be discussed with the Queen Regent first. Do I make myself clear? Tyrion swallowed a sigh of relief, careful not to let it show. Perfectly, Your Grace. Cersei inclined her head, though Tyrion saw the anger smoldering in her eyes. As you command. Good, Joffrey said with a dismissive wave. Now leave me. I have no more time for squabbles before breakfast. Biting back a retort, Tyrion bowed again. As he turned to go, he felt Cersei's glare boring into the back of his skull. It had been a tenuous victory. Joffrey had sided with him enough to confirm his authority over the Watch, but Cersei had been granted a say in any major changes. That left plenty of room for her to meddle. Still, it was better than letting her wrest away control outright. He left the throne room with Pod scuttling behind. They stepped into the corridor, stepping aside to let a procession of minor lords pass. Tyrion kept his head high, ignoring their sideways glances. His thoughts churned. Joffrey's decision gave him breathing room, but it also meant he had to be subtler than ever in his maneuvers. If he made any bold moves without telling Cersei, she would cry treason in Joffrey's ear. As he headed back toward his own chambers, Ion summoned a servant girl and asked her to bring bread, cheese, and ale. He had neglected food for too long, and a starving mind was prone to missteps. After he'd eaten, he planned to meet with Varys, assuming the spider was lurking somewhere in the labyrinth beneath the Red Keep. Varys always had a knack for gleaning secrets, and Tyrion needed to know exactly which lords and knights Cersei was courting behind closed doors. When he reached his chamber, he found the servant girl already waiting with a platter. She set it on his table, curtsied, and departed with haste. Tyrion wasted no time. He devoured a chunk of bread, some soft goat cheese, and washed it down with ale, all while Pod stood near the door, fidgeting with his belt as though uncertain where to look. Tyrion offered him a crust of bread, which Pod accepted timidly. Eat, Pod, Tyrion said, and then you can escort me to the Lord Confessor's tower. I have a guess that Varys might be haunting those halls today. Pod bowed. Yes, my lord. By the time they finished, the sun was climbing higher, and the corridors had grown livelier with nobles, courtiers, and staff moving about on their daily routines. Yet Tyrion sensed an undercurrent of tension in their hushed voices and wary glances. No one wanted to be caught in the crossfire between the two Lannisters who effectively ran King's Landing. They arrived at a dimly lit hallway lined with faded tapestries. The air smelled of old parchment and candle wax. A single door stood ajar, leading into a small library annex. Tyrion had a hunch he might find Varys sifting through records. He had discovered the spider's presence here on more than one occasion, poring over genealogies and old legal documents, gleaning odd bits of knowledge. Indeed, as Tyrion nudged the door open, he caught sight of the eunuch standing by a dusty shelf, examining a scroll. Varys turned smoothly, his silken robes whispering around his plump form. He bowed deeply. "My lord Tyrion, what a pleasure to see you this bright morning. I heard rumors of quite the commotion in the throne room." Tyrion gave him a skeptical look. "I'm sure you heard more than rumors. Spiders are known for having keen senses." Varys' smile was all benevolence. "You give me too much credit. I am but a humble servant of the realm." "Yes, well, I need that humble service right now," Tyrion said. "I want you to tell me which lords or knights have been summoned to the Queen Regent's private chambers or otherwise solicited by her proxies in the last day. I suspect she's forging alliances, offering them positions, gold, anything that might bind them to her cause." Varys clasped his hands. "Ah, yes. The Queen Regent does keep busy. Let me think." He paused, tapping a finger on his chin theatrically. "Lord Giles Rosby was seen entering her chambers late last night, presumably to discuss the crown's debts, though I suspect more was said. Ser Balman Byrch, a knight of middling influence, was also in attendance, as was Lady Tanda Stokeworth. Additionally, a small retinue of House Hayford was escorted to a private audience with her just after dawn." Tyrion made a mental note of each name. None were particularly mighty lords, but collectively they held small pockets of power around King's Landing and in the Crownlands. Enough to form a small but potentially vocal bloc of support for Cersei. "How susceptible are they to bribes or threats?" he asked. Varys chuckled. "My lord, every person in the city can be swayed by the right combination of coin, fear, and promise of advantage. Lord Rosby is ill and anxious about the future of his lands, which makes him quite pliable. Ser Balman dreams of glory, and Lady Tanda is perpetually worried about her family's position. The Hayfords are proud but weakened by recent misfortunes. None of these are unbreakable pillars of loyalty." Tyrion exhaled. "That's something at least. I need to ensure they don't become cornerstones of Cersei's scheme. She won't overthrow me with an army of Sellswords, but if she garners enough support among the noble houses, she might orchestrate something more insidious, like pushing me out through a royal decree or poisoning Joffrey's mind until he demands my removal." Varys nodded sympathetically. "Indeed, we are in the midst of a most delicate dance. One misstep could send you tumbling, and the Queen Regent will not hesitate to see you humiliated. Perhaps you might counter her approach by extending your own invitations to these lords? If you promise them more than she can, or at least sow doubt about her fortunes, they might refrain from joining her." Tyrion considered it. "A game of courtesies. Yes, that's one avenue. I could invite them to a feast or a private audience, claim it's an effort to secure the realm's stability. But how to do so without rousing her suspicion?" Varys' eyes twinkled. "You are the hand of the king. It would not be odd for you to entertain minor lords concerned about the city's stability, particularly if you frame it as an open forum for suggestions. The only question is whether you can keep the Queen Regent from twisting such a gathering to her advantage." Tyrion raked a hand through his hair. "She'd probably see it as a threat to her own standing. But better she see it and fume than work in secrecy. The more public my gestures, the harder it is for her to spin them as treasonous." He paused, letting his thoughts align. "Yes. I'll host a small reception in the Solar off the Great Hall tomorrow evening. Invite these uncertain lords, Rosby, Byrch, Lady Tanda, House Hayford's delegates, and a handful more. We'll talk of bread prices, guard rotations, anything to show I care about their input. If they leave feeling consulted and valued, they might resist Cersei's manipulations." Varys dipped his head. "A splendid idea, my lord. I shall be happy to pass along those invitations quietly so as not to appear too sudden or suspicious." "Excellent. And Varys, please keep your little birds watching. If Cersei plans something drastic, I want warning before her noose tightens." "But of course, Lord Tyrion. The realm is ever in need of watchful eyes." With that, Tyrion departed, pot at his heels. He felt a jolt of renewed energy, as though he had taken a more proactive stance against the creeping threat. If he could peel away the lesser houses Cersei courted, he could undermine her support without drawing swords. Open battles were risky. Far better to wage this war in the realm of whispers and deals. Yet even as he walked, his mind circled back to the tension that still hung in the air. Cersei was no fool. She'd guess his intentions soon enough, and she'd retaliate in a manner designed to catch him off guard. He needed to ensure that he was never alone in a vulnerable position, never lacking a guard or ally at his side. The morning wore on, and he spent the hours reviewing finances with the royal treasurer who, like so many before him, complained of the crown's deep debts. The cost of feeding the city, maintaining the gold cloaks, and financing the war at the borders had drained the coffers. Tyrion made sure to direct enough funds to keep the watch well paid. Loyalty was more robust when men were not hungry. By midday, he retreated to a shaded courtyard for a moment's respite. A fountain gurgled at the center, trickling water into a marble basin carved with leaping fish. The air was sultry and the scent of jasmine clung to the few potted flowers that grew in the corners. Tyrion stood there, letting the quiet cool of the courtyard ease his frayed nerves. A pair of gold cloaks stood discreetly at the entrance, ensuring he was not disturbed. He closed his eyes, just for a moment, and tried to imagine he was far away from King's Landing, a place free of intrigue and sibling rivalries. His wandering thoughts drifted to Shae, the woman he'd hidden away in a modest house near the keep. The memory of her warm laughter and teasing smile stirred an ache in him. She was perhaps his lone comfort in this viper's nest, yet he couldn't even openly acknowledge her presence. If Cersei ever discovered Shae, she would use that knowledge to hurt him. Tyrion knew it all too well. He might have lingered there longer, soaking in the brief calm, had Pod not rushed into the courtyard, eyes wide. "My lord, I've just heard from one of Ser Jacelin's men. There's been a disturbance near the Street of Flower. A fight broke out and the people are claiming the watch was slow to respond. There's talk of a riot." Tyrion grimaced. "Damn. Just what we need. All right, Pod, fetch Bronn. We'll ride out with some men and see to it ourselves. The last thing I want is a riot to hand Cersei an excuse to say I failed the city." The scene in the Street of Flower proved worse than he expected. The rancid smell of spilled ale and rotting vegetables assaulted them as they approached on horseback, flanked by a double file of gold cloaks. A cluster of angry commoners stood around a boarded-up bakery, shouting at the building's closed doors. From their heated complaints, Tyrion learned that the baker had been watering down flour and selling loaves at twice the usual price. When a few hungry folk confronted him, fists flew, and then knives appeared. 2 men lay on the ground, bloody and unmoving. When Tyrion arrived, the crowd's anger turned toward the watchmen. A knot of citizens pressed forward, shaking fists and hurling accusations. "Where were you?" one old woman cried. "They're killing each other in broad daylight, and the gold cloaks do nothing." Another voice shouted, "They only protect the highborn." Tyrion raised a hand to signal for calm, though his voice was nearly lost in the tumult. The gold cloaks stepped in a line, spears leveled, forming a barrier between the crowd and Tyrion. Bronn barked orders for the people to stand back. The tension crackled in the hot midday sun. Tyrion cleared his throat and projected as loudly as he could manage. "Good people, we understand your anger. These murders will be investigated, and the culprit punished. I am Tyrion Lannister, Hand of the King, and I vow justice will be served." His words elicited curses and jeers, but also a few quiet nods. He pressed on. "If the baker cheated you, he'll be made to answer. Violence in the streets only hurts yourselves. Let the law deal with wrongdoers. You have my word. The watch will not neglect you again." He looked over at the gold cloaks behind him and lowered his voice. "I want a contingent patrolling here day and night. Arrest that baker if he's inside. Arrest anyone who took part in the killings. We'll sort out guilt later. The key is to show the people that the crown won't ignore their pleas." One of the watch captains saluted, though Tyrion saw fear in the man's eyes. The city was a tinderbox. A single spark could ignite an inferno. He recalled the last time a riot broke out, how the mob had nearly torn Joffrey apart, and how many innocents perished in the chaos. As the watchmen moved to disperse the crowd, Tyrion caught snippets of the people's grumbling. Complaints about high prices, lack of reliable bread, suspicion that the crown hoarded grain while the poor starved. Pained him to hear it, but it was the reality. The city's population had swelled with refugees from the war, and supplies simply didn't stretch far enough. All his cunning at court couldn't conjure wheat from the air. He lingered long enough to oversee the arrests, making sure the watch employed minimal force. When the crowd had thinned, Tyrion and Bronn rode back toward the Red Keep, accompanied by a smaller escort. Pod followed, looking pale and anxious. Bronn broke the silence. "You see how close that came to a real riot, don't you? If that crowd had turned on the watch in earnest, we'd have had to fight our way out. And if a riot starts, it'll spread like wildfire through Flea Bottom." Tyrion nodded heavily. I'm aware. Which is why we need to keep the peace. For all her faults, Cersei at least understands the danger of an angry mob. But she might exploit these tensions to undermine me. She'll say I failed to keep order. Bronn grunted. Then maybe we do as you said, pay the gold cloaks enough, keep them on the streets, crack down on crimes quickly. That might calm the small folk. I'll do what I can, Tyrion replied. But we're nearly bankrupt. We've borrowed from the Iron Bank of Bravos, from the Tyrells, from anyone who would lend. The Golden Company might come knocking next if we're not careful. He sighed. Still, if I must choose between spending on bread or new swords, I'll choose bread. An army can't hold a city whose people hate them enough to tear them to pieces. They rode in silence for a few blocks, weaving through the narrow streets. The sun beat down mercilessly, stirring the stench of refuse from the gutters. Beggars crouched near alley mouths, calling out for coin. Tyrion felt the weight of their eyes, their silent judgment. He was a Lannister, a highborn lord who possessed a full belly while many of them starved. And yet he was the one risking a feud with Cersei to preserve what fragile stability remained. When they finally returned to the Red Keep, Tyrion dismounted stiffly. His back ached from the ride, and the tension of the day lay like a rock in his gut. As he passed through the gatehouse, he noted the increased presence of guards, some he recognized as loyal men under Bywater's command, others less familiar. He wondered if Cersei had succeeded in placing more watchers of her own. Each passing day would bring new chess moves in their unspoken conflict. A page approached hesitantly, announcing that the Queen Regent wished to meet with the Hand in her solar immediately. Tyrion shared a look with Bronn, whose eyes rolled in a gesture of sardonic amusement. Tyrion thanked the page, though inwardly he braced himself. Another confrontation so soon, Cersei was not wasting time. He made his way to her solar, which lay off a secluded corridor in Maegor's Holdfast. 2 Lannister guards stood outside, men Tyrion recognized as longtime loyalists to Cersei. They stepped aside as he knocked. A voice within bid him enter. The solar was a lavish room with wide windows overlooking the Blackwater, the afternoon sun spilling golden light onto plush carpets. Cersei sat on a cushioned settee near a low table, a pitcher of wine and 2 cups laid out. She watched Tyrion with carefully measured disdain as he approached. He noted that the curtains were drawn to keep out prying eyes and no attendants were present. She wanted this discussion private. You asked for me, Tyrion said, keeping his tone even. I did, Cersei replied, her voice cool. Sit. He complied, though he remained perched on the edge of the cushion as if ready to spring away. What matter requires my attention? She took a slow sip from her wine cup. The matter of the city's security. Word spreads of the brawl in the Street of Flower. The people are restless. Some blame you for neglecting them, others blame me for the high prices. Either way, unrest grows. Tyrion set his jaw. I was there. The Watch intervened. We are addressing it. So I hear. But I also hear you intend to hold a gathering of lords tomorrow evening. You invited Rosby, Birch, and a handful of others. Are you planning to show them what a splendid hand you are? Or buy their loyalty with half-promises? Tyrion inhaled slowly. Varys must have delivered the invitations, and already Cersei knew. He was hardly surprised. I intend to discuss the city's problems openly to reassure them that we have a plan for controlling prices and preventing riots. A gesture of good faith. Her lip curled. Good faith. Don't insult my intelligence. You aim to woo them away from me. If they believe you hold the keys to the city's fortunes, why should they bother seeking my favor? Tyrion cocked his head, letting a thin smile form. So you admit you were courting them first? She set her cup down a bit too forcefully, the wine sloshing. If you're foolish enough to stand in my way, I'll remove you. Joffrey's indulgence won't last forever. He grows bored of your lectures and your pious talk about helping the small folk. If he tires of you, not even your precious gold cloaks will save you. Tyrion regarded her carefully. She was coiled like a cat about to pounce, all fury masked by regal bearing. I have no desire to go to war with you, Cersei. The city has enough problems. Must we add our own feud to the list? Her eyes flashed. Don't pretend you haven't been plotting against me. You replaced the city watch's officers with men who take your coin. You humiliated me in the Great Hall. You've done all this while preaching unity. I replaced incompetent officers, Tyrion said, and prevented you from illegally seizing command. I did what was necessary to keep the peace. If that offends your pride, that's unfortunate. She rose abruptly, fists clenched. You think I'll suffer your insolence? You're a malformed imp who's wormed his way into power, but you have no real claim. Father only made you hand because he isn't here to do it himself and because Jaime is held captive. If Jaime were free, you'd be nothing more than a court jester. Tyrion bristled at the mention of Jaime but kept his composure. And yet here I am, the hand recognized by Joffrey's decree. Face it, sister. We both have our roles. We can either share power or destroy one another trying to hoard it. She stared him down, her breathing ragged. For a heartbeat, he thought she might fling her wine in his face. Then she exhaled slowly as though reining in her temper. You're impossible. But you're right in one sense. If the city erupts in chaos, we all lose. So I will permit your little gathering. Let the lords hear your reassurances. We'll see how persuasive you are. But if you do anything that directly undermines me, I'll do nothing so foolish, Tyrion lied calmly. Cersei gave a single, curt nod. We're done. She didn't look at him again as she turned away, staring out the window at the distant glimmer of the Blackwater. Tyrion rose, bowed with exaggerated courtesy, and let himself out. Once in the corridor, he released the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was as close to a truce as he was likely to get. She would watch him like a hawk, but for the moment, she wasn't summoning swords or calling him traitor. He still had time to shore up his position, and her implicit acknowledgement of the gathering meant she wasn't confident enough to stop him outright. He made his way back to his chambers, more determined than ever. If the city was on a knife's edge, then tomorrow's meeting would be crucial. He needed to show those minor lords that the crown, through him, had a plan to stabilize prices and quell riots. If he convinced them, they'd spread his message to the rest. And perhaps, just perhaps, enough of the realm's movers and shakers would rally behind Tyrion to keep Cersei in check. Yet as the sun lowered over King's Landing, casting long shadows across the ramparts, Tyrion could not dispel the gnawing fear that the city's unraveling was only beginning. In his bones, he felt the tension building, waiting for a spark to light the fuse. And in King's Landing, sparks were always in plentiful supply. He retired to his chamber, requesting a bath and a hot meal, hoping to wash away the day's grime and gather his thoughts. Pod helped bring the tub and water, though the boys' awkward attempts at conversation quickly faded into a respectful silence. Tyrion scrubbed himself, sank into the warm water, and allowed his mind a moment of quiet. But rest proved elusive. His thoughts drifted to the upcoming feast, to the precarious state of the city, to the unstoppable force that was Cersei's wrath. He closed his eyes, imagining for a fleeting second a place far from here, perhaps Pentos, where no one cared if you were a dwarf so long as you had gold to spend. But that was a dream for another life. Here and now, he was locked in a struggle that he must win or perish trying. After he dressed in a fresh tunic of crimson brocade, he settled into a chair near the window overlooking the Red Keep's courtyard. The flickering torches below illuminated the silhouettes of patrolling guards. Some belonged to him, some to Cersei, and all marched under the banner of the Lannister lion, yet they were two prides competing for supremacy. Tyrion sipped wine and stared at that flickering scene, pondering how to stay one step ahead. Somewhere in the city, men were whispering in back rooms, forging alliances, selling information. Ration shops were closing for the night, leaving hungry families to wander back to cramped hovels. Thieves skulked in the alleys. Brothels opened their doors to patrons seeking distraction. The hum of humanity drifted on the night air. He thought of the day's events, the near riot, the confrontation with Joffrey, the private talk with Cersei, and the deal struck to hold his reception. Tomorrow would be pivotal. Every detail mattered. He made a mental list of tasks, send a messenger to the royal kitchens for a suitable menu, arrange seating carefully so that potential allies sat together, ensure the room was well guarded but discreetly so. Every subtlety might shift the course of the evening. At length, weariness overcame him. He climbed into bed, letting darkness claim him. Throughout the night, he dreamed of swirling lights and dancing shadows, of lords bowing to him with mocking smiles, and of Cersei's laughter ringing in a chamber lined with wildfire. He tossed and turned, feeling the city's weight upon him. He rose at dawn, bleary-eyed but resolute. There was no time to waste. He dressed in a doublet of black velvet trimmed with gold thread, something that struck the right balance between authority and modesty. He ate a small breakfast, milk, and a honeyed pastry, and then set about final preparations for the evening's gathering. He visited the solar off the great hall, where servants were arranging tables and cushions. The chamber had tall windows that let in ample light, the walls adorned with rich tapestries depicting scenes of hunts and feasts. Tyrion directed them to set out enough chairs for a dozen or so guests, plus himself at the head of the table. He wanted the space to feel intimate but impressive. He also stationed a handful of gold cloaks nearby, not right inside the room, but at the corridor leading in. If any trouble arose, they could be summoned in an instant. He did not expect violence, but caution had kept him alive thus far. As the day wore on, courtiers arrived for various matters, and Tyrion kept an ear out for any news of sabotage. Bronn reported that some of his men had trailed Cersei's servants to the manse of Lord Giles Rosby, where whispered talk suggested the Queen Regent had pressed him to refuse Tyrion's invitation. But old Rosby, concerned about his holdings, might defy her anyway. Tyrion also heard that Lady Tanda Stokeworth was flustered, unsure whom to side with, while Ser Balman Buir was boasting in the taverns about receiving attention from both the Hand and the Queen Regent. All of it was to be expected. These were not battle-hardened warriors, but petty courtiers looking for favor. Tyrion took hope from the fact that they had not outright refused him. Their arrival, or lack thereof, would reveal much. At last, evening approached. Servants laid out simple but fine fare: roasted fowl, spiced wine, fresh loaves, and a variety of stewed vegetables. Enough to display the crown's hospitality without seeming wasteful during a time of scarcity. Varys appeared, gliding into the solar to wish Tyrion luck and to suggest a careful seating arrangement. Tyrion agreed, placing Rosby, Buir and the Hayfords close to him, while Lady Tanda sat a bit farther along, next to a talkative minor noble who might fill her head with positive chatter. When the guests began to arrive, Tyrion greeted them in his most genial manner. Lord Giles Rosby appeared first, coughing into a handkerchief and bowing stiffly. He offered polite compliments about the decor. Ser Balman Buir followed, sporting a freshly polished breastplate and an air of self-importance, bowing deeper than was strictly necessary. Lady Tanda Stokeworth came in a flurry of apologies, claiming she was late because of some personal emergency at her estate, though Tyrion suspected she had simply dithered. Representatives of House Hayford, a young knight named Ser Lambert Hayford, and his older cousin who served as castellan, arrived, looking cautious but curious. Tyrion noted their finely embroidered cloaks, likely a remnant of better days. They seemed grateful for the invitation. A scattering of other lesser lords and ladies trickled in, enough to fill the table with muted chatter. Tyrion took his seat at the head. Pod hovered by the wall, ready to assist as needed. The meal began. Servants circulated with wine pitchers. Tyrion made light conversation, inquiring about each guest's concerns. The older cousin of House Hayford complained of bandits on the roads. Ser Balman griped about how no one appreciated his knightly valor, and Lady Tanda worried aloud about rumored unrest in Flea Bottom. Tyrion listened attentively, offering well-practiced sympathies. Only once the first course was done did Tyrion stand, raising a cup of spiced wine in a gesture for silence. The guests turned their eyes to him, some weary, some expectant. Tyrion let the pause linger just long enough to hold their attention. My lords and ladies, I welcome you here tonight in the spirit of cooperation and mutual interest. We all know King's Landing faces hardships, rising prices, refugees swelling the streets, tensions that occasionally flare into violence. As Hand, it is my duty to see these challenges addressed. But I cannot do so alone. I need the support of the Crown's loyal subjects. Your support? He met their gazes, lingering on each face. I know whispers suggest the Crown cannot even feed its people. But I assure you, we are taking steps to import more grain, to stabilize costs, to ensure your lands and your folk remain safe. I have allocated additional funds to the City Watch to increase patrols and deter banditry. Ser Balman leaned forward eagerly. Is it true, then, that the Crown will be dispatching extra soldiers to keep the roads safe? My own route from the Rosby Road was plagued by highwaymen. Indeed, Tyrion replied, though we lack the resources for a large-scale deployment, I've instructed the City Watch to send detachments beyond the gates for patrol. With your cooperation, we can coordinate with local garrisons. Lord Giles coughed raggedly. That will cost a fair sum, I imagine. Who is paying for it? The question drew murmurs. Tyrion forced a smile. The Crown bears the cost, my lord. We are also exploring a modest levy on certain luxury goods to help balance the burden. He left out how little coin actually remained in the royal treasury. Lady Tanda looked relieved. It is good to hear you are taking decisive action, my Lord Hand, but some question your rivalry with the Queen Regent. Are we to face a conflict at the highest level of power? Tyrion waved a hand in a dismissive gesture. Conflict? My dear lady, there is no conflict, merely a difference in approach. Queen Cersei and I both serve King Joffrey's interests, and we remain united in our desire to keep the city prosperous and safe. He did not dare glance at Varys, who lurked in the background, but he could almost sense the spider's silent amusement. Then the rumors of discord are overblown? Asked Ser Lambert Hayford, arching a brow. Tyrion shrugged. Rumors often are. This is King's Landing. Whispers can become roars overnight, but seldom reflect the truth. Judge me by my actions, if you will. Tonight, my actions are to feed you, to listen, and to promise that your voices will be heard at court. In return, I ask for your faith in the crown's ability to weather these difficulties. He let his gaze sweep the table. If you have grievances, share them. If you have counsel, speak it. If you have fears, let me address them. I stand ready to serve. A palpable sense of relief settled over some of the guests. The conversation blossomed anew, turning more constructive. Tyrion circulated among them, shifting from seat to seat, encouraging them to speak freely. Many expressed worry about trade routes, the threat of war in the countryside, or the rising cost of living in the city. Tyrion offered carefully measured responses, never promising more than he could deliver, but giving them hope that the crown was not blind or indifferent. He noted with satisfaction that none of them openly mentioned Cersei's alternative proposals or threatened to withdraw support unless they had her blessing. Perhaps they sensed the shifting winds. Perhaps they merely feared appearing disloyal in front of the hand. Regardless, it was a small victory. As the evening wore on, servants brought out a final course of candied fruits. The mood had grown almost convivial. Ser Balman boasted about his martial prowess in the war. Lord Giles Raspy coughed through an anecdote about his father's cunning negotiations with Tywin Lannister. Lady Tanda and Ser Lambert chatted about potential betrothals. Tyrion watched them all, feeling some of the tension ease from his shoulders. Then the door opened. All heads turned. Cersei Lannister stood in the threshold, resplendent in a crimson dress, her hair brushed to a gleaming sheen. Silence fell like a shroud over the room. Tyrion felt his chest tighten. He had not expected her to appear uninvited, but he supposed he should have. Subtlety was not her style when she wanted to make a statement. The Queen Regent offered a gracious smile that did not reach her eyes. "My lords, my ladies. What a pleasant gathering. May I join you?" They all rose, bowing or curtsying. Lady Tanda looked almost panicked, Ser Balman stiffened, and Lord Giles coughed twice. Tyrion forced a smile. "Of course, dear sister. We were just discussing how best to maintain stability in these uncertain times." Cersei glided into the room, her gaze sweeping over the guests. "I'm delighted to see you have all brought your concerns to the hand. No doubt he's reassured you of the crown's unwavering support. I only hope he has not overpromised. Times are dire, after all." Ser Lambert cleared his throat. His lordship was quite forthcoming. "We are gratified to hear that additional patrols are being funded, that the roads—" "Patrols?" Cersei interrupted smoothly. "That sounds wonderful, but funding can be quite scarce. I hope you do not intend to burden our loyal houses with new taxes, Tyrion." Her tone was sweet, yet the challenge beneath it was clear. Tyrion swallowed, hating that she forced him to defend his plans. "Only modest levies on certain luxuries, sister. The realm must share in its own protection." "Of course," she said, giving him a cutting look. "I only urge caution. We wouldn't want to ignite resentment among those who can least afford it." Silence stretched. The guests fidgeted. Some quietly sipped wine, uncertain where this exchange would lead. Tyrion took a breath, maintaining his calm. "Indeed, caution is vital, as is prudent governance, which is why we carefully target these measures and keep the burden low." The Queen Regent, I'm certain, agrees on the necessity. Their eyes locked, each daring the other to flinch first. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, Cersei stepped forward and reached for a cup of wine. She raised it gracefully. "To King Joffrey," she declared, voice ringing. "May his reign be blessed with wisdom, unity, and a prosperous realm." Relieved murmurs sounded as everyone lifted their cups. Tyrion joined the toast, though he kept his gaze on Cersei. She was making a show of unity, which meant she was playing a deeper game. But for the sake of appearances, he welcomed it. The tension receded somewhat, and people returned to hushed conversations. Cersei moved among them like a queen in her court, accepting bows and forced smiles. She asked polite questions about House Hayford's finances, inquired about Lady Tanda's daughter, and feigned interest in Ser Balman's martial tales. All the while, Tyrion could see her measuring each response, assessing alliances, comparing them to whatever promise she had made in private. At one point, she pulled Tyrion aside near a window. The night sky beyond was clear, and the moon bathed the courtyard in pale light. She kept her tone quiet, for his ears alone. "A bold move, brother, inviting them here without telling me. But I see now why you did it, shoring up your base of support. Clever." He answered in the same hushed volume. They are Joffrey's subjects, not mine alone. You could have invited them too, but that might have ruined the secrecy you love so well." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "I will not deny that I prefer to handle matters in private, but if you insist on doing it openly, very well. Let's see who wins their favor in the end." "Let's," Tyrion said, refusing to back down. She offered a tight-lipped smile, then turned away to speak with Lord Giles, leaving Tyrion to wonder how she would retaliate next. The evening ended without overt conflict. One by one, the guests departed with polite bows, expressing gratitude for the hand's hospitality. Some had clearly enjoyed themselves. Others, especially those torn between Tyrion and Cersei, wore guarded expressions. Either way, Tyrion counted it a success that no one openly defected to her side. When the last of them had gone, and Cersei finally swept from the room with her head held high, Tyrion sank into a chair, feeling as though he'd survived a pitched battle. Varys appeared from the shadows, offering a congratulatory smile. "Well done, my lord. You have shown them that you are neither weak nor incompetent. They may still fear the Queen Regent, but they will at least pause before spurning you." "That's all I can ask for," Tyrion said wearily. "But it's only one bout in a longer contest. Cersei won't be so gentle next time." "No," Varys agreed, his voice as light as ever. "She will not." Tyrion gestured for a servant to pour him one more cup of wine. He stared into the crimson liquid, swirling it slowly. The flame of the nearest torch reflected in its surface, flickering like a captive star. He thought of the day's events. The uneasy peace with Cersei, the city's tenuous stability, and the looming question of who truly controlled King's Landing. Perhaps no one did. Perhaps the city was a wild beast that could only be placated, never truly tamed. But if there was any man cunning enough to try, it might be Tyrion Lannister. He drained the cup and stood, letting the last guests depart. Outside, the wind carried the faint noise of distant shouts and laughter, a city that never truly slept. Tyrion sighed, wishing he could find respite in dreamless slumber. But he knew the night would likely bring more uneasy visions. Tomorrow, the dance would continue. He only hoped he would still have the strength to lead it. Morning returned with an oppressive haze hanging over King's Landing, a misty sheen rising from the black water that smudged the sky. Tyrion woke to the muffled clamor of the city stirring into life. Though the previous night's gathering had gone smoothly enough, he felt a renewed burden as he pushed himself upright in bed. Each day demanded unrelenting vigilance if he was to keep Cersei from overturning all his hard-won advantages. He dressed quickly in a simple tunic of dark brown linen, deciding to forego finery in favor of practicality. The battles he faced were not fought with swords alone, but with wits, gold, and words, and he found such contests more exhausting than any physical skirmish. As he strode out of his chambers, Podrick joined him, handing him a scroll that bore Varys' delicate handwriting. Tyrion broke the wax seal and scanned the contents. Varys wrote that several of the lords who had attended last night's reception had returned to their manors or townhouses with guarded optimism. Some had already been approached by Cersei's agents, who either offered them greater incentives or dropped veiled threats. According to Varys, Lady Tanda Stokeworth seemed the most apprehensive, uncertain which side would ultimately prevail. Ser Balman Buire was basking in the novelty of attention from two powerful patrons. Lord Giles Rosby remained fretful about his health and finances, thus easily swayed by whichever side promised him stability. All of it confirmed what Tyrion already suspected. The dinner had worked somewhat, but Cersei was retaliating in the wings. He tucked the scroll into his belt. "Come, Pod. Let's see if we can catch Ser Jacelyn and Bronn before they vanish into the city." They found Ser Jacelyn Bywater near the training yard, watching a group of young gold cloaks drill with wooden swords. The clang of practice blades rang against the stone walls. Bywater offered Tyrion a quick salute. "My lord, I trust you slept better than I did. The men are unsettled by rumors of infiltration. Some say the Queen Regent has posted watchers among the watchmen themselves, checking who might speak ill of her." Tyrion frowned. "I've no doubt that's true. I'd do the same in her place. Keep an eye out for any novices or older veterans who changed their behavior abruptly. If they start reporting your every move, or mine, we'll know they've been bought." Bywater's mouth set in a grim line. "I'll try to weed them out without sowing panic. Morale is fragile enough as is." Before Tyrion could respond, the men drilling in the yard abruptly parted. Bronn ambled through, a half-grin twisting his mouth. He wore freshly oiled leathers, a sword belt slung low on his hips. "There you are," Bronn said to Tyrion. "I was wondering if I'd have to search the whole keep just to find you." Heard some crows cawing about trouble near the mud gate again. Tyrion cocked his head. "Trouble of what sort?" Bronn shrugged. "A rumor that a ship from the Arbor arrived carrying only half the expected grain. People are worried about shortages. Whenever the rumor starts, the crowds near the gate stir up a fuss." Tyrion glanced at Bywater, who nodded. "I can send a squad of watchmen to keep order, my lord," the knight said, "but I'll need more bodies if an actual riot breaks out." "I'll see what can be done," Tyrion replied. "But we must not abandon the rest of the city in the meantime. If we concentrate too many men at the gates, we invite chaos elsewhere." Bronn scratched at his stubble. "If you want, I could go myself. Show my face, maybe drop a few threats to calm the loudest mouths." Tyrion pursed his lips. It was tempting. Bronn's presence often worked wonders at quieting troublemakers, though he did so in a manner that sometimes led to spilled blood. "We want a show of force, but not an excuse for violence. If you can accomplish one without the other, be my guest. Take a dozen reliable men. Should something larger erupt, send a runner." Bronn inclined his head. "I can do that. And if any fools decide to start throwing stones at the watch, well, some heads might need cracking. Only if absolutely necessary," Tyrion warned. "We're already on a knife's edge with the small folk. Too much force, and they'll blame me for tyranny. Too little, and they think we're weak. A delicate balance." Bronn's grin held a certain feral humor. "Delicate or not, I'll manage." He departed with a small escort of city watch, leaving Tyrion with Bywater in the dusty yard. Tyrion watched the recruits practice another set of drills, their wooden swords pounding loudly. Each strike echoed the tension in his own skull. War raged beyond the city, but within these walls, the war was one of secrets and persuasion. He walked on with Bywater at his side, discussing administrative minutiae, which gates needed extra men, how many crossbows were in the armory where the night patrols were thin. The tasks were endless, but Tyrion preferred the surety of methodical work to aimless dread. If nothing else, controlling the watch gave him an edge that Cersei could not easily pry away. At length, he sent Bywater off to manage the daily watch changes, then retreated to the Tower of the Hand to address more letters, each one a small brushstroke in the larger portrait he was trying to paint, a city that believed in its government. He wrote to lords in the Crownlands, gently inquiring about their harvest yields, hinting that the throne would pay a fair price for any surplus grain. He penned a note to the ironworkers along the Blackwater, urging them to keep forging arms for the watch at stable rates, promising compensation once the Crown's finances improved. Small acts, all intended to stave off collapse. By midday, his eyes were bleary from reading and writing. He set aside his quill, flexing his cramped fingers. Outside, the sun glared through the arrow-slit window, shimmering off the river. His stomach growled, and he realized he'd taken no meal since dawn. He pushed himself away from the desk and signaled Pod to follow. They descended the tower's spiral steps, the stone cool beneath their feet, until they emerged into a corridor near the royal kitchens. The smell of roasted meats and fresh bread wafted up, making Tyrion's mouth water. He didn't trust the communal dining hall at the moment, too many prying eyes and potential spies, so he took a tray of food from a harried servant and found a quiet alcove to sit in. Pot stood awkwardly until Tyrion motioned for him to join him on the low bench. They ate in near silence, chewing through slices of cold beef and nibbling on onion bread, washing it down with watered wine. At last, Pod cleared his throat. "My lord, if I may ask, how much longer can we keep this up? Balancing everything, I mean. The Queen Regent wants to control the watch, the people are angry. Can it really hold together?" Tyrion gave a tired half-smile. "That's the question, isn't it? I suppose it will hold until it doesn't. My job is to make sure it doesn't all unravel tomorrow or the next day." He studied the young squire's face, seeing genuine worry there. "I know it looks grim, Pot, but if we can keep the peace and maintain our alliances, we stand a chance. Even the Lannister name isn't enough on its own. I need every loyal sword, every coin of support, every whisper of intelligence to outmaneuver my sister." Pod nodded, though he didn't look entirely reassured. "I'll do whatever you command. That's all I ask. Now finish your bread and fetch me another cup of wine." After the hasty meal, Tyrion felt slightly more human, though his mind never stopped worrying. He considered visiting Shay, but dismissed the idea. It was too great a risk, especially in broad daylight. Cersei might have watchers trailing his every step. Instead, he returned to the Great Hall to see if there were any pressing petitions or official audiences. The hall was quieter than usual, Joffrey was nowhere in sight, and so fewer petitioners bothered to come. A trio of merchants were present, arguing with a bored-looking court official over the new tariffs. Tyrion listened with half an ear before strolling out again, deciding that matter was too trivial for his direct intervention. He was about to head back to his tower when a breathless page rushed up, panting out that the Queen Regent requested his presence in the royal September. Tyrion's brow creased in confusion. Cersei was not especially devout. She rarely had use for the Sept except on ceremonial occasions. Nevertheless, he followed, suspecting some new gambit on her part. The royal Sept was a stately edifice near the Red Keep's main courtyard, its stained glass windows throwing colored light onto the polished floor. Tyrion entered, the hush pressing against his ears. The sweet scent of incense hung in the air. A few silent septas drifted near the side aisles, heads bowed in prayer. Cersei stood by the ornate altar wearing a gown of deep blue that clung to her figure. She looked up sharply at Tyrion's approach. "My lord Hand," she greeted, voice echoing in the stillness. "I thought it only proper we speak here, under the gaze of the Seven. Perhaps they will guide us to civility." Tyrion eyed her warily, unsure where this was going. "Indeed, I'm sure the Seven are eager to witness another sibling quarrel." She arched one delicate eyebrow. "Must everything be a quarrel? I hoped we might find common ground. The city stands on a precipice, does it not?" He stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. "It does, and we both have a duty to protect it. But you've shown time and again that you prefer to isolate your power." Cersei let out a soft breath, her hands clasped in front of her. "I will not deny that I guard what is mine fiercely. Yet I also see the shadow on the horizon, famine, riots, the war beyond our gates. I realize, grudgingly, that perhaps we should present a united front to the realm, at least until these crises pass." Tyrion studied her face, searching for signs of artifice. "You propose a truce, then? A genuine one, or just another tactic?" She frowned. "You think so little of me, Tyrion, but yes, a truce. In the king's name. Joffrey is at the center of this. If the people lose faith in their king, or if the lords see the crown is divided, the realm will collapse. I do not want that. So, shall we put aside our differences temporarily?" Her words held a ring of sincerity that surprised him. He crossed his arms, weighing the possibilities. She might be sincere, or she might be lulling him into complacency. But if she truly did want cooperation, it could buy him time to strengthen the city's defenses further. "Very well," he said slowly. "Let us define the terms. We make no moves against each other's supporters, we refrain from undermining each other's authority in front of Joffrey, and we pool resources to manage the city's shortages." "Agreed." Cersei inclined her head, golden hair catching the soft light from the stained glass. "Agreed. And I will speak to Joffrey, urging him to support your measures openly rather than belittle them. In return, you'll inform me of any major decisions regarding the Watch or city governance before implementing them." "Yes." A flicker of caution lit Tyrion's mind. She might want early notice of his plans so she could sabotage them. Then again, refusing her might drive her back into open hostility. He gave a measured nod. "Within reason. The Watch must sometimes move quickly, but I'll advise you of any broad reforms or appointments." She extended a hand, palm up, in a gesture reminiscent of a vow. "Then let us consider this an accord. For the good of King's Landing." Tyrion hesitated only a second before taking her hand. The touch felt cool, a fleeting moment of familial intimacy in a place meant for holy reflection. "For the good of King's Landing," he echoed. She withdrew her hand and turned her gaze to the marble statue of the mother, one of the Seven. "We've lost Father's guiding hand and Jaime's sword arm. All we have is each other, as much as it pains me to admit it." A pang of unexpected emotion flickered in Tyrion's chest. The truth was, despite all the hatred and mistrust between them, they were still siblings. "Perhaps one day we can learn to trust each other without fear," he said, half to himself. She said nothing in reply, only lingered a moment longer before sweeping from the Sept, leaving him amid the colored lights and drifting incense. Tyrion watched her go, still unsure if he had just made a wise move or walked into a trap. The lines she had offered sounded reasonable, yet Cersei was nothing if not cunning. He needed to be vigilant, now more than ever. Nonetheless, as he left the Sept, he felt a tentative sense of reprieve. If Cersei kept her word even partially, they might stave off total disaster. This was not exactly a triumph, but a temporary ceasefire could be enough to let him address the city's more pressing issues. He thought of the unrest at the gates and in Flea Bottom, the precarious finances, the looming threat of large-scale riots. All those problems required immediate attention. He spent the afternoon drafting edicts. With Cersei's newfound cooperation, he risked a bolder approach to controlling food prices. He proposed a cap on bread costs in the city market, backed by crown subsidies to bakers who agreed to the fixed price. This would demand coin the crown barely had, but it might quell the rising anger among the small folk. Tyrion also ordered an audit of local granaries and warehouses to see if any hoarded supplies could be seized for fair compensation. True to his word, he sent a copy of these proposed measures to Cersei's chambers, seeking her concurrence before finalizing them. She responded surprisingly fast with minor adjustments, mostly on who would oversee the distribution. Tyrion marveled at the relative calm of their exchange. The sense of peace was so foreign he half expected a hidden dagger to appear with every messenger. By dusk, he was bone-tired yet cautiously optimistic. The watch captains were relaying his orders, aided by Bywater's steady leadership. Bronn had reported from the Mud Gate that no riot had materialized after all. He'd convinced the angriest dockworkers that the rumors about half-lost shipments were exaggerated. As always, gold and intimidation proved persuasive. Still, Tyrion refused to let down his guard. He posted extra men around his own quarters, ensuring no sudden surprises in the night. He even checked in with the kitchens to verify his food was untainted. King's Landing was rife with poisoners, and a suspicious death would be all too convenient for Cersei, truce or no truce. That night, he settled into bed late, his mind churning with the day's accomplishments. He stared at the dark ceiling, replaying Cersei's vow in the Sept, wondering if the gods themselves had witnessed her promise or scoffed at it. After a long while, he slipped into uneasy slumber. He woke before dawn to frantic knocking at his door. Podrick's voice came muffled through the wood. "My lord, wake up. There's an urgent message from Ser Jacelyn." Tyrion bolted upright, heart pounding. He yanked on a robe and unlatched the door. Pod stood there, hair askew, holding a small parchment. Tyrion snatched it, scanning the short, urgent lines. Bywater wrote that a fire had broken out in the northern quarter, near one of the main granaries. Smoke was rising, and if the wind carried sparks, it could spread rapidly. The watchmen were trying to contain it, but it might be arson. "Damn," Tyrion hissed, tearing off his nightclothes and dressing with Pod's help as quickly as possible. A fire in or near the granaries could be catastrophic. The city was already short on supplies. Losing a significant stash of grain would unleash panic. He rushed out, Pod scurrying behind, rounding up a handful of gold cloaks along the way. Outside, the early sky was stained with the faintest pink, and the breeze carried the acrid tang of smoke. As they crossed into the streets, he saw a dark plume rising in the north, twisting ominously above the rooftops. They arrived at the site in a hurried carriage, the gold cloaks jogging alongside. By the time they reached the granary district, the fire had spread to 2 adjacent storehouses. Orange flames leapt from windows, tongues of light licking at the pre-dawn gloom. Citizens ran back and forth, hauling water from a nearby well. Some sobbed, others shouted directions. The heat and the smoke choked the narrow streets. Bywater appeared, streaking his face, shouting for a bucket line. "My lord," he called when he saw Tyrion, "we're doing what we can, but it's spreading fast. If we can't contain it, half the district might burn." Tyrion coughed into his sleeve. "Do we have any means of dousing it beyond bucket lines?" Bywater shook his head. "We tried to bring in some wagons to carry water from the river, but the roads are cramped and the smoke confuses the horses. The best we can do is keep it from jumping to the next row of buildings." Tyrion swallowed, looking at the terrified faces of the small folk. This was precisely the type of disaster that could plunge the city into chaos. If the granaries burned, the bread price would skyrocket again, and desperation would turn to fury. He clenched his teeth, mind racing. "We need to organize a firebreak. Tear down some structures if necessary, anything to keep the blaze from spreading. Bronn's men might handle that more efficiently than a frantic mob." Bywater nodded, dispatching a runner to find Bronn. Tyrion joined the bucket line himself, passing sloshing pails of water from hand to hand. The heat scorched his cheeks and sweat trickled down his spine. Citizens whispered his name in surprise, not expecting to see the hand of the king covered in ash. But Tyrion had no time to stand aside. If he could help quell the flames, he would. Hours passed in a blur of shouted commands and stinging smoke. The sky brightened from gray to pale blue, but the sun's warmth was overshadowed by the blaze's hellish glow. Eventually, Bronn arrived with a squad of armed toughs. They began hacking at wooden walls to create a barrier. Elsewhere, watchmen knocked holes in rooftops, dumping water inside, trying to keep the fire from leaping across alleyways. Finally, by midday, the flames subsided to smoldering embers in the storehouses. The granary itself was badly damaged, though portions of its stores were saved. Thick smoke still hung in the air, but the immediate threat of the entire district catching aflame seemed to have passed. Exhausted men and women slumped in the streets, coughing and wiping soot from their eyes. Tyrion's arms ached from the labor of hauling buckets, and his throat felt raw. He found Bywater near the charred entrance to the granary. Report, Tyrion croaked, eyes streaming from the lingering smoke. Bywater cleared his throat. It seems the granary's eastern wing collapsed. We lost about a third of the stored grain. The other 2 storehouses were nearly gutted. We saved what we could, but the damage is severe. No official tally yet on the total loss. It'll be a blow to the city's reserves. A third gone. Tyrion swore under his breath. That was enough to disrupt the shaky equilibrium of the market. Do we know if it was deliberate? Bywater's expression grew grim. I spoke to witnesses who claimed they saw a cloaked figure sneaking into the storehouse last night, just before the flames started. No one got a good look, but it points to arson. Tyrion's thoughts flew to Cersei's potential involvement despite their truce. Or perhaps to some agent of chaos wishing to see the city collapse from hunger, an enemy across the sea, or a saboteur from a rival house. Whatever the case, it spelled disaster. We'll need to investigate thoroughly. Question everyone in the area. Offer a reward for information on the arsonist. Bywater gave a tired nod. I will. For now, though, the people are terrified. They think this was a ploy by the crown to starve them, or a sign that the gods have abandoned the city. Tyrion ground his teeth. We'll put an end to that rumor. Begin distributing what remains of the grain in controlled rations to keep panic at bay. And keep a presence here around the clock so no looters take advantage of the chaos. He left Bywater to organize the watchmen and forced himself back to his carriage. Pot accompanied him, both of them covered in soot. As they started the journey to the Red Keep, Tyrion stared out at the wrecked district, blackened timbers, and columns of smoke. His heart felt heavier than ever. All the civic measures and cunning politics in the world would be for naught if the city starved. When he arrived at the keep, the courtyard bustled with anxious talk about the fire. Cersei stood near the main steps, speaking with a cluster of minor lords. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Tyrion's disheveled state. He climbed out of the carriage, ignoring the stares of courtiers. Cersei approached, dismissing her companions with a gesture. What in the world happened? You look half a corpse. Granary fire, Tyrion rasped, rummaging in a satchel for a waterskin. He took a long gulp. We lost a significant portion of our reserves. Likely arson. I spent the last few hours trying to contain it. She set her jaw, genuine concern flickering across her features. Arson? If so, the culprit has done incalculable harm. Did any suspect name me as responsible? The question was blunt, but Tyrion understood her worry. If the small folk believed the Queen Regent set fire to the city's grain, they might turn on the crown in a flash of violence. No one named you, Tyrion said, but it won't stop rumors. People are frightened. We must respond firmly and together. This is precisely the kind of crisis that demands a united front. She glanced around at the gawking nobles. Then she lowered her voice, directing him toward a more private corner of the courtyard. I'll order an official announcement condemning this heinous act. We'll promise swift justice for whoever dares sabotage the city's stores. Offer a reward if you like. That's exactly what I intended, Tyrion said, relief blooming that she did not immediately twist this incident to her advantage. We'll need to reassure the merchants, too, or they might hoard what's left to drive prices up. She gave a curt nod. Then let's do so. For once, I think we are in agreement. He paused, eyeing her carefully. Though she looked pale and shaken by the news, she did not seem to be gloating. Was it possible she truly had no hand in the fire? Tyrion believed her enough to dismiss the notion that she'd done this on purpose. Or if she had, she was a far better liar than he'd ever guessed. Then we must act swiftly, he said. I'll go to the Great Hall and draw up the announcement with you if you wish. She gestured for him to follow. Yes, let's put on a show of unity. The realm needs to see us side by side, not bickering. They walked together, ignoring the astonished looks from knights and ladies who had grown used to the pair snarling at each other. In the Great Hall, Joffrey sat slouched on the Iron Throne, looking bored as a pair of petitioners droned about a land dispute. He perked up when he saw his mother and uncle approach. Cersei whispered in Joffrey's ear, and he immediately dismissed the petitioners with a wave of his hand. They scuttled away, mystified but obedient. Joffrey listened with growing alarm as Tyrion recounted the fire. The boy's face reddened with anger. Who would dare set fire to my granaries? I want them hunted down and flayed. Tyrion grimaced. We're offering a reward for any leads. Your Grace, we also need to address the city at once, reassuring them you will punish the culprits. Panic is our enemy. Joffrey leaned forward on the throne, tapping a finger on the metal arm. Very well. I'll tell them I'll have the traitor's head spiked above tea. He gates. Cersei softened her tone, perhaps sensing the need for decorum. A firm declaration, my sweet king, but we must phrase it carefully. The small folk are frightened. We want them to trust that you'll protect them, not just punish criminals. Joffrey shrugged, unconvinced. Fine. Do as you like. But I want heads. You hear me, uncle? Tyrion bowed. I do, your grace. Rest assured, we will be relentless. He and Cersei retreated to the side of the dais, hurriedly drafting a statement to be read by the court herald. They emphasized that the crown regarded this as an act of treason, that Joffrey stood ready to safeguard his people, and that a reward would be granted for information leading to the arsonist's capture. Cersei's penmanship was quick and neat, and she added a flourish at the end that invoked the protection of the Seven. When it was done, the herald stepped forth and read it in a ringing voice that carried through the hall. Courtiers whispered among themselves, and a few looked reassured by the show of solidarity between the Queen Regent and the Hand. Joffrey sat, chin high, basking in the aura of authority as though the words had come from him alone. Afterward, Tyrion felt a flicker of satisfaction. For once, they had managed a crisis in tandem. If the city accepted their stance, perhaps mass panic could be avoided. Yet he could not forget the deeper implications. If sabotage was truly at play, who was behind it? He had no shortage of enemies, and the crown had even more. Perhaps it was a move to destabilize King's Landing from within. He spent the remainder of the day coordinating with Bywater, ordering additional patrols around every major warehouse, commanding a thorough investigation in the northern quarter. Whispers circulated that someone had glimpsed a scarred man skulking away just before the flames took hold. Another rumor suggested a band of exiled mercenaries might be to blame. Tyrion offered coin for any solid clue, but the swirl of rumors remained maddeningly vague. Evening approached, and Tyrion at last found a moment to wash and change into fresh clothes, scrubbing the last of the soot from his skin. As he dried himself, he stared at his reflection in the mirror, mismatched eyes, lines of fatigue etched into his brow. Being Hand of the King was aging him faster than he'd imagined. His father had shouldered this burden for years. Tyrion marveled that the man had kept his hair from turning white. When night fell, Tyrion convened a small council in his chambers, Bywater, Bronn, and Varys. By the flickering light of a half-dozen candles, they dissected the day's events. Varys relayed that certain merchants now feared the crown would seize their goods under the pretense of preventing more fires, while Bronn reported that tension remained high at the Mudgate, with crowds demanding reassurance that there was still enough grain. Bywater repeated what he'd discovered on the ground. That the damage was severe but not total, and that so far, no one had come forward with reliable testimony about the arsonist's identity. It might be a foreign agent, Varys offered, lacing his plump fingers. Stannis Baratheon or another claimant to the throne could benefit from seeing the city starve. Or it could be internal sabotage, Bywater muttered. A disgruntled noble who wants to see Lannister power undermined. Bronn shrugged. It's a big city. Could be anyone, someone furious at the high prices, or someone who lost a family member in the last riot. Doesn't take grand politics to stoke revenge. Tyrion's temples pounded with the onset of a headache. Whoever it is, they nearly caused a catastrophe. For now, we keep watch, we question suspicious figures, and we clamp down on any further attempts to sabotage our stores. We don't have the luxury of letting this slide. If they strike again, the city might tear itself apart. His companions nodded somberly. They stayed a while longer, mapping out how best to guard the granaries and quell rumors. When they finally departed, Tyrion stood by the chamber window, gazing at the dark silhouette of the city. Torchlights marked the streets in small clusters. He could still smell faint traces of smoke on the night breeze. He wondered if Cersei felt the same weight on her shoulders. Their fragile truce had been tested already, and for once she had not broken it. That was a small solace in a day of calamity. At length, he lay down in bed, hoping for respite but fearing fresh nightmares. He drifted into shallow sleep, half dreaming of flames devouring the city walls, hearing the screams of hungry mobs. More than once, he startled awake, heart pounding, but there was nothing in the darkness but his own ragged breathing. When dawn arrived, he rose stiffly, no less tired than before. Pod was already waiting with the day's messages, a neat stack of them bound by twine. Tyrion lit a candle and poured himself a cup of water, steeling himself for whatever fresh trials awaited. He thumbed through the letters, pleas from merchants, requests from lesser lords, a note from Lady Tanda fretting about the shortage of bread in her household. Then one letter stood out, a small piece of parchment folded many times bearing a broken seal he did not recognize. He opened it carefully, scanning the brief scrawl. We know who burned the granaries. He works under your nose. You walk a fine edge, meet me at the House of Humble Brothers in Flea Bottom by sunset, alone if you want answers. No signature, no clue to the writer's identity. The words were rushed, the handwriting jagged, but the message was clear. Someone claimed knowledge of the arsonist and wanted a clandestine meeting. It could be a trap, an attempt to lure him into danger, or it could be a genuine lead. Tyrion's mouth felt dry. If this was a chance to expose the saboteur, he couldn't ignore it. Yet going alone into Flea Bottom was suicidal. He glanced at Pod, whose eyes darted over the letter with apprehension. "We can't trust this, my lord," Pod whispered. "It could be a ploy to kidnap or kill you." "I know," Tyrion murmured, "but if there's even a chance it's genuine." He thought of the city's precarious fate. Another fire, another blow to the food supply, and everything could collapse. If someone truly had information, Tyrion needed to take the risk. But he would not walk into the lion's den unprepared. He rose abruptly, tucking the letter into his sleeve. "I'll speak to Bronn. We'll arrange something." Quietly. Pod nodded, worry etched across his face. Tyrion patted his shoulder in an attempt at reassurance. "Don't fret, Pod. Danger is part of my daily routine. I might even miss it if it vanished." He marched out, mind set on the evening's clandestine errand. Once more, the game had shifted. If this unknown informant possessed real knowledge, Tyrion might root out the saboteur and solidify his hold on King's Landing. If it was a trap, well, he would make certain to have an escape plan. He was a Lannister after all, and Lannisters always paid their debts, in gold or in blood. He made his way through the winding corridors, passing newly posted guards who snapped to attention. For better or worse, he was determined to see this through. The future of the city depended on it. And if the city was his to hold, he would hold it fast no matter the price. He only prayed he would not pay that price with his life. Tyrion departed the Tower of the Hand with quick, purposeful steps, the mysterious message tucked inside his sleeve. The corridors echoed with the shuffle of servants and the clink of guards changing shifts. Outside, the day was bright, the heat pressing in like a heavy cloak. Dust motes shimmered in sunbeams that filtered through the high windows. He found Bronn near the barracks yard, watching a pair of gold cloaks spar with dull-edged longswords. Bronn leaned against a post, expression half bored, half appraising, as the men lunged and parried under the midday sun. He turned at Tyrion's approach, one eyebrow rising at the sight of the hand bearing a serious look. Tyrion wasted no time. "We have a rendezvous in Flea Bottom tonight. Potentially dangerous. Potentially crucial." Bronn snorted. "Flea Bottom is always dangerous, especially for a man like you. But you say crucial, so I'm listening." Tyrion glanced around to ensure no eavesdroppers lurked nearby. A few off-duty watchmen stood at a distance, but no one appeared to be straining their ears. He lowered his voice. "I received an anonymous letter. Someone claims they know who set fire to the granaries. They want to meet me alone at the House of Humble Brothers by sunset." Bronn's smirk thinned. "Alone? That's a bad idea, my lord." "Indeed," Tyrion said. "But if this is real, we might uncover the arsonist and prevent another catastrophe. If it's a trap, I'd rather not stroll right into it like a halfwit. So I intend to bring you and a handful of your best men in secret." Bronn nodded slowly. "We can go in plain clothes. Keep our weapons hidden. A few men in the surrounding alleys ready to rush in if anything goes sour." "Exactly. I'll approach the meeting spot by myself, or at least appear to. You and your men will watch from a distance." Bronn grinned. "I do enjoy these cloak and dagger outings. I'll gather 4 or 5 I trust. We'll be there before sundown, scope the place out, then wait for you to arrive." Tyrion let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you. This must remain between us. Not even Bywater. If the saboteur is truly under our noses, as the note says, I can't risk anyone's loose tongue." "Understood," Bronn said, his grin fading into something more focused. "I'll see to it." They parted ways. Tyrion spent the afternoon as calmly as he could, reading reports of minor fires in the city, thankfully none as devastating as the granary blaze. From what the watchmen gathered, these incidents were accidental hearth outbreaks or drunken mishaps, but every spark made people jumpy. He also read a short missive from Cersei detailing her attempts to reassure Joffrey and the nobles about the crown's stability. Tyrion had to give her credit, she was holding up her end of their fragile truce. Yet that fragile peace only made him more anxious. An unknown arsonist lurked among them, or perhaps some foreign agent. If Tyrion could expose the culprit, he would take a major step toward truly stabilizing King's Landing and ensuring Cersei had no further reason to doubt his leadership. But if the meeting in Flea Bottom proved a dead end or a trap, all his careful gains could unravel. As dusk approached, he dressed in drab clothing to avoid drawing notice, a patched doublet in dark gray, breeches of a similar hue, and sturdy boots. He even dispensed with his usual cloak bearing the Lannister sigil. Podrick looked stricken at the sight of Tyrion going out without fanfare. My lord, should I come as well? Pod asked. No, Pod, Tyrion said gently. I need you to remain here. If something goes wrong, I want you to inform Ser Jacelyn and, if necessary, the Queen Regent. But only if I fail to return by tomorrow's dawn. Pod's eyes widened, but he nodded. I understand. Tyrion patted him on the shoulder. Good lad. With luck, we'll be back before midnight. He left the Tower of the Hand through a side exit, avoiding main corridors. Bronn waited outside the walls of the Red Keep, dressed in plain leathers with a hood pulled low. 4 of his men loitered in the shadow of a narrow street. They looked rough enough to blend into Flea Bottom's usual crowd. After a few muttered confirmations, they set off down the city's sloping roads. The further they went, the tighter the buildings pressed together, their walls leaning like old drunks, the reek of waste pooling in every gutter. Smoke from cooking fires mingled with the stench of unwashed bodies. A few battered lanterns flickered above cramped doorways. Voices murmured in a guttural undertone, the language of survival in King's Landing's poorest district. They kept to the edges of the main thoroughfares, passing alehouses with chipped wooden signs, glimpsing sallow-faced children scurrying barefoot among rubbish piles. Now and then, Bronn's men drifted ahead or lagged behind, ensuring no one followed too closely. Tyrion kept his head down, hood pulled up. He was far from inconspicuous in shape and stature, but at least in Flea Bottom's dim corners, few would guess the hand of the king crept among them. He guided them by memory toward the House of Humble Brothers, a modest sanctuary run by a religious order that tended to the poorest folk, offering meager meals and a place to sleep for those with nowhere else to go. It was a small structure of weathered stone and patched roofing. A rickety wooden sign, painted with 7 small figures in simple robes, hung above a crooked doorway. As they neared, Bronn signaled for his men to peel off into nearby alleys. One slid around the corner of a dilapidated house. Another took position near a broken cart. The final 2 lingered under the eaves of a boarded-up shop across the lane. If anything went awry, they would close in swiftly. Tyrion felt a twist in his gut. He hoped it would not come to that. He stepped up to the door alone. Voices murmured from within, and a weak yellow glow seeped through the cracks in the ill-fitting shutters. He knocked softly. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a bearded man in a threadbare robe, a piece of rope serving as a belt. His eyes were wary, scanning Tyrion up and down. "Have you come seeking shelter?" the man asked. Tyrion cleared his throat. "I received a message to meet someone here. They might have been in need of confession." The bearded man studied him, then stepped aside without comment. Tyrion entered a small antechamber that smelled of musty straw. A trio of cots lined one wall, occupied by huddled figures who might have been sleeping or merely shivering. A guttering candle lit the space, revealing the edges of worn blankets and chipped pottery. "Wait here," the robed man said, disappearing through a curtain into a back room. Tyrion heard hushed voices, then soft footsteps. After a minute, the man returned. "You can go in. The one you seek is inside." With a nod, Tyrion passed through the curtain. Beyond lay a cramped chamber that might once have been a stable or storeroom. A single lantern dangled from a rafter, throwing dancing shadows. Along the walls, shelves held loaves of stale bread and battered wooden bowls. In the center stood a figure wrapped in a hooded cloak of rough brown fabric, hands clasped before them. Tyrion halted, heart thumping. He waited, letting the hush stretch until the figure finally raised its head, revealing a pale face half hidden by the hood. It was a woman, perhaps in her 30s, with a lined forehead and sharp, intelligent eyes. Tyrion had never seen her before. "You came," she said softly. "I wasn't sure you would." Tyrion forced a thin smile. "When someone claims they know who threatened the city's survival, I'm inclined to listen." She glanced at the lantern as if gathering courage. "I wrote you that note because I can't abide what's happening. People starve and someone dares to burn the grain meant to feed them. You must stop it." Tyrion took a careful step closer. "And who is someone? How do you know them?" Her gaze flicked toward the doorway, then back to him. "I was once a servant in the Red Keep, dismissed a few months ago over a trifling matter. I had a friend there who stayed on. Recently, he confided that he'd overheard talk of sabotage. It came from a man of influence in the castle, a man who wants to destabilize your hold on the city. A man who answers ultimately to Peter Baelish." Tyrion felt an immediate jolt of wariness. Littlefinger. Of course that weasel might have a hand in this. Peter Baelish is far from the city, supposedly. He left on some mission months ago. The woman nodded. Yes, but his agents remain. One in particular, Olivar, a petty functionary, has been seen meeting with Sel's words in secret. My friend overheard him boast that the fire was only the first step. He's planning more. Tyrion frowned. Olivar, he recalled, a minor clerk who flitted among the castle's lesser offices. Not someone of high rank, but if he was acting on Baelish's orders, that could be dangerous indeed. Peter Baelish specialized in hidden manipulation, forging chaos for his own gain. Are you certain he orchestrated the arson? Her voice shook slightly. I only know that my friend overheard him laughing about how the city would soon be ripe for picking once the people were desperate enough. Then he mentioned a certain Scar as the man who lit the fire. I assume that's a Sel's word. I can't prove any of it, but if you look for this Olivar, you might find more evidence. Tyrion's mind churned. If Baelish or his cronies set this in motion, the aim was clear: create turmoil, weaken the Lannisters' control, and profit from the ensuing chaos. Littlefinger's cunning was notorious. Why tell me now? Why not go to the Queen Regent or Ser Jacelyn Bywater? Her expression soured. Cersei terrifies me, as does the City Watch. But you've shown you care about preventing these disasters. You're not killing small folk for sport. My friend, and I hoped you'd do what's right. He studied her for a moment, searching for any hint of deception. She appeared earnest, voice trembling with nerves. If this was a trap, she was a skilled actress. But her story fit too well with what Tyrion knew of Littlefinger's scheming nature. What is your friend's name? He asked. And where can I find him? She shook her head. He wouldn't want me to share that. He's afraid. But if you investigate Olivar, I'm sure you'll find leads. Just please be discreet. Tyrion exhaled, taking a measured breath. If I do find evidence, I'll ensure Olivar faces justice. And if your friend fears reprisal, I can arrange safe passage out of the city, somewhere Baelish's men can't reach him. A flicker of relief touched her face. That might help. I'll let him know. Good, Tyrion said softly. Then I thank you for this information. Our conversation never happened. I suspect you value anonymity. She nodded, tugging her hood lower. Yes, my lord. Take care. Chaos is stirring in King's Landing, and many stand to gain from it. Without further word, she slipped to the far side of the chamber, lifting a loose board from the wall and vanishing into a passage. Tyrion stood there, heart pounding, the lantern's flame dancing overhead. If she spoke true, the sabotage was bigger than some random saboteur. It might be part of a broader scheme orchestrated by Peter Baelish from afar, sowing ruin in the capital to undermine the Lannisters. He needed proof. Accusing Baelish without evidence would be folly, especially if Olivar played but a piece in this. Tyrion turned, stepping back into the antechamber where the bearded brother bowed silently, letting him pass. Outside, he signaled once and Bronn and his men drifted out of the shadows. Well? Bronn asked quietly. Tyrion kept his voice low. We've a name, Olivar. A minor clerk in the keep connected to Littlefinger. He might be behind the arson. Or at least part of it. Bronn's mouth crooked in a wry smile. Never liked that sly bastard, Baelish. So do we snatch up this Olivar now? Tyrion shook his head. We must be careful. If we haul him in with no public proof, he'll deny everything. Better to watch him, catch him in the act, or uncover something incriminating. If we can show the city he's the saboteur, we can quash rumors that the crown burned its O.W.N. grain. Bronn tilted his head as they began moving back up the street. All right. I'll place watchers around Olivar, subtle ones. When he meets that Scar fellow again, we'll catch him red-handed. Do it quietly, Tyrion said. I don't want Olivar spooked. They made their way through Flea Bottom's tangle of alleys, accompanied by the stench of refuse and the occasional drunk stumbling past. One of Bronn's men asked if Tyrion wanted to slip out another route to avoid notice, but Tyrion insisted on caution. They weaved around rickety shacks, taking side streets until they emerged onto a broader lane leading toward the castle hill. As they walked, Tyrion's mind raced. If Baelish's agent was truly behind the granary fire, then more plots might follow. Baelish played a long game. The goal might be to weaken House Lannister's hold on King's Landing, to stoke anger among the small folk, or even to pave the way for an outside force. Tyrion recalled too well how Baelish delighted in turning chaos into a ladder for his own ascent. By the time they reached the Red Keep's outer gate, the moon hung overhead, shrouding the world in cool silver. The guards gave Tyrion and his companions only a cursory glance, assuming they were returning from official business. Within, the torchlit passages felt oddly claustrophobic after the sprawl of Flea Bottom. They parted ways quietly. Bronn headed off to brief his watchers while Tyrion climbed to his chambers, adrenaline still surging. He found Pod pacing anxiously, but the squire relaxed at the sight of his safe return. Tyrion dismissed him with a few brief words and shut the door, mind whirling with the revelation that Littlefinger's network was undermining the city from within. He lit a candle on his writing desk and sat heavily, trying to piece together a strategy. Confronting Olyvar openly might drive him to ground. Better to let him think no one suspected him until Bronn's watchers found conclusive proof. Then Tyrion could present the evidence to Joffrey, to Cersei, even to the city's merchants, showing that the crown was not at fault for the fire. That, in turn, would bolster Tyrion's standing and further solidify his hold on the gold cloaks. But he also knew Cersei might rage if she discovered Baelish was behind this. She loathed Littlefinger's duplicity almost as much as Tyrion did. Yet if he told her too soon, she might act rashly, tipping Olyvar off. He needed to weigh every move carefully. An hour passed, then two, as he scribbled notes and half-formed plans. Eventually, exhaustion overcame him. He stripped off his dusty clothes and lay in bed, drifting into fitful dreams. He dreamed of tall towers collapsing, of crows picking at scorched grain, of Littlefinger grinning while the city burned. He woke more than once, heart rattling, but each time forced himself back to uneasy sleep. Morning arrived in a haze. Tyrion repeated his daily rituals. A brief wash, a sparse meal, and a stoic nod to Pod as they descended the tower steps. Bywater's updates brought small relief, no fresh calamities overnight. The watchmen remained on alert, the people still rattled but not rioting. Tyrion took solace where he could find it. Quietly, he explained to Bywater that one of Baelish's men might be implicated in the granary fire. He asked Bywater to stand ready if they needed a quick arrest, but not to act yet. Bywater offered no outward sign of doubt, only a curt nod of acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Bronn set his watchers to tail Olyvar. Over the following days, Tyrion feigned normalcy, attending to petitions in the Great Hall, sharing polite nods with Cersei whenever they crossed paths, and approving small disbursements of coin to subsidize bread. Yet beneath it all, he was poised like a hawk, waiting for news. Finally, on the third night after the Flea Bottom meeting, Bronn tracked Tyrion down in a lesser courtyard. Torches sputtered in the damp evening air, their light casting jagged shadows on the stone. Tyrion, who had just finished inspecting a new group of watch recruits, turned as Bronn approached. "We've got him," Bronn said quietly. Olyvar left the castle after sundown, met a scar-faced cell's word in a dingy wine sink by the Dragon Gate. "My men overheard them discuss a job, another accident. Something about setting a wagon of flour ablaze near the harbor tomorrow." Tyrion exhaled slowly, relief tinged with dread. "We have the proof we need, then?" "My men say yes." Olyvar spoke openly about the last job paying off well. He even hinted at his higher connections, though he never named Baelish outright. The cell's word bragged about the granary fire, said next time they'd spark a blaze closer to the shipping docks. They parted ways shortly after. "I'd wager that if we corner Olyvar right now, we can force a confession. Or better yet, catch him in the act tomorrow, then bring him before everyone." Tyrion weighed the options. Public exposure would be best. Dragging Olyvar out with proof would quell rumors that the crown was behind the sabotage. But waiting until tomorrow risked losing him if something went awry. "We'll act tonight," Tyrion decided. "Seize him at his quarters in the keep. Confiscate whatever letters or coin he might have that link him to Baelish. Then we'll haul him before Joffrey, or better, the entire court at sunrise. The city must see that a traitor was behind the fire, not the crown." Bronn grinned wolfishly. "I'll gather a few men. We'll make it quick." They set the plan in motion. Tyrion informed Bywater, who assembled a hand-picked squad of gold cloaks, those loyal to Tyrion, sworn to secrecy. The group moved stealthily through the keep's corridors, guided by a young watchman who knew where Olyvar lodged. Past flickering torchlight, they reached a modest door near the treasury offices. Bywater positioned his men at either end of the hall. Bronn stood beside Tyrion, hand on his sword hilt. On Tyrion's nod, Bronn pounded on the door. "Open up. King's business." A startled cry came from within. Seconds later, Olyvar cracked the door, eyes wide with alarm. He recognized Bronn, then saw Tyrion and tried to slam the door shut. Bronn's shoulder crashed into the wood, sending the clerk stumbling back. Watchmen poured in, seizing Olyvar. "What is the meaning of this?" Olyvar sputtered, face pale. "I've done nothing wrong." Tyrion stepped forward, voice calm but edged. "That remains to be seen. You're suspected of conspiring to sabotage the city's grain supply. I advise you not to struggle. He nodded to Bywater. "Search the room." As two watchmen tore through Olivar's chest of belongings, Olivar spat denials. "This is absurd. I serve the crown faithfully. One of the watchmen lifted a small pouch, heavy with coin, from under the bed. He poured it out on a table. Gleaming gold dragons spilled forth, far more than a low-level clerk should possess, especially in these lean times. Another watchman pried open a hidden compartment in the wooden bed frame, producing scraps of parchment scrawled with coded references, shipments, meeting places, potential targets. Tyrion plucked one scrap from the watchman's hand, scanning it. The references to the scar and a kettle of flame were impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Olivar's face shone with sweat, eyes darting around for an escape. He lunged at a watchman, but Bronn slammed the hilt of his sword into the clerk's gut, dropping him to his knees. Grim satisfaction twisted in Tyrion's stomach. "You've been a busy man, Olivar. The city stands on the brink of starvation, and you're setting fires to make it worse." He leaned in. "I know who your master is. Would you like to confess, or shall we drag it out of you?" Olivar's eyes, wild with fear, flicked from Tyrion to Bywater's stern face. I can explain. I did nothing more than what I was told. It's not my fault. I needed the coin." "Who paid you?" Tyrion demanded, though he guessed the answer. Olivar's lip quivered. "One of Lord Baelish's men in the city. The orders came from him. I swear, I never intended to harm anyone. Tyrion cut him off. "Take him to a secure cell. We'll question him further later. Make sure the parchments and coin are gathered as evidence." Bywater's men hauled Olivar away, the clerk wailing pleas for mercy. Bronn's grin was predatory as he helped gather the incriminating notes. Tyrion stood there a moment, feeling a heady mix of relief and anger. They had the saboteur in custody, but the true puppet master lay far beyond their reach. Baelish. Still, exposing Olivar's crimes would be enough to clear the crown of blame for the granary fire and reassure the city. Tyrion planned to make a spectacle of it. They reconvened in Tyrion's chambers near dawn, finalizing how to reveal the plot. Bywater would escort Olivar into the Great Hall before the court, presenting the seized parchments and coin. Tyrion would stand with Cersei and Joffrey, proclaiming that justice had been done. The city, reeling from fear, would see a clear villain punished. They might still grumble about bread prices, but at least they'd know the crown was not burning its own food stores. When the time came, the Great Hall filled with curious courtiers and bored noble hangers-on. Joffrey lounged on the Iron Throne, Cersei at his side, looking uneasy but composed. Tyrion stood below them, his hands folded. Bywater marched Olivar in, chains rattling. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembly. The clerk appeared pale and disheveled, terror etched into every feature. Bywater announced the charges in a stentorian voice, detailing how Olivar had confessed to paying a scar-faced cell's word to start the granary fire, aiming to destabilize King's Landing. The evidence was read aloud, coded notes, bribes, and gold. The crowd erupted in shock and outrage. Tyrion watched their faces, grateful that none of it implicated the crown. Whispers flew about Baelish, though his name was not spoken openly. That might come in time, but for now Tyrion only needed Olivar's guilt to be unmistakable. Joffrey, scenting a chance for theatrics, stood and pointed at Olivar. "You conspire to starve my city? I should have you torn apart by dogs." Olivar blubbered apologies, tears streaking his cheeks. Tyrion exchanged a glance with Cersei. She nodded as if to say she approved the swift action. Olivar's fate was sealed. Joffrey's brutal impulses might demand a harsh sentence, but Tyrion stepped forward, calling for the man to be thrown in the dungeon indefinitely, subjected to formal questioning. In truth, Tyrion hoped to wring every detail from him, who else was involved, how Baelish's instructions were sent. Then, perhaps, a public execution would follow, sealing the matter in blood. The Great Hall roiled with excitement and horror. Cersei rose from her seat, addressing the courtiers in a resonant voice, proclaiming that the crown would always protect the people from traitors, that no arsonist or saboteur would go unpunished. Tyrion marveled at how quickly she seized the moment to show unity with him, praising the hand's diligence and the city watch's vigilance. As the guards dragged Olivar away, Tyrion met Cersei's gaze. Relief flickered between them. They had thwarted another scheme to undermine the city together. This triumph might not end all ills, nor did it rid them of Baelish's lurking menace. But for now, King's Landing could breathe easier knowing the culprit had been unmasked. Later, as Tyrion departed the hall amid a swirl of conversation, Bronn sidled up with a half-smile. "Well played, my lord. The small folk will hear about this by nightfall. They'll be cursing that fool Oliver, not you or the queen." Tyrion nodded. "Exactly. Let them see this as the crown's victory against a saboteur, not a battle between siblings. The less they suspect a deeper game, the better." Bronn cast him a sidelong glance. "That deeper game remains, though. Baelish is out there, pulling strings. You going after him next?" "In time," Tyrion said, voice low. "But for now, we have a city to feed and a precarious peace to maintain." They walked on, the torches in the corridor burning with a steady glow. Tyrion realized that, for the first time in weeks, he felt a measure of confidence. True, there was still Cersei to contend with, still the looming specter of Littlefinger's intrigues, still the threat of riots if bread ran out. But the gold cloaks answered to him, the Queen Regent was at least momentarily allied with him, and the small folk would have reason to believe in his leadership. One crisis at a time, Tyrion told himself. If he could keep the capital intact, that alone might be a feat worthy of song. He parted from Bronn, heading to the Tower of the Hand. Outside, the sun shone brightly on the courtyard. Guards in gold cloaks moved with renewed vigor, and stable hands bustled about, chatting about the dramatic scene in the throne room. Tyrion climbed the winding stairs to his private chamber, feeling each step in his aching legs. But there was a lightness in his heart. At the top, he paused by the window, gazing over King's Landing. The sprawl of rooftops and winding streets stretched away toward the glimmering waters of Blackwater Bay. Smoke still rose faintly from parts of the northern quarter, a reminder of recent tragedy. Yet despite the scars, life went on below. The city survived because he had fought for it, shielded it from internal treachery, and harnessed the loyalty of the gold cloaks to block Cersei's worst impulses. His own reflection stared back from the glass, a dwarf with cunning eyes, shoulders bearing the weight of the realm. Perhaps this was what he was meant for. Not simply to be an outcast or a punchline, but to wield power in a way that no one had expected of him. Father would never have believed he could hold the city together. Cersei still might doubt him. But he was proving day by day that a dwarf could stand tall in King's Landing. He allowed himself a small, wry smile. The game continued, and he was no longer just a piece on the board, he was a player. Whatever came next, he would be ready.